clouds on fire, the air is sharp. Voices rising, breaking the dark. Hearts thump faster like a drum. The night's alive, here it comes. We got the results, the dice is cast. Feel the pull of the future past. Cheer or cry, the moment's here. History's loud, it's crystal clear. Lights are flashing, the screens are tall. Waves of hope crash through the hall. Win or lose, the story grows. Every step the nation shows. We got the results, the dice is cast. Feel the pull of the future past. Cheer or cry, the moment's here. History's loud, it's crystal clear. Lights are flashing, the screens are tall. Waves of hope crash through the hall. Win or lose, the story grows. Every step the nation shows. We got the results, the dice is cast. Feel the pull of a future past. Cheer or cry, the moment's here. History's loud, it's crystal clear. Let's go clear. Let's go clear. Some will sigh, some will shout. Voices tangle in the doubt. But through the noise, the truth will soar.
And welcome to tonight's Order Paper Podcast. How's Laura been?
Busy? Yeah.
Oh, there's been a lot on the cards that have been happening over the last week. At least the house didn't go into urgency.
Yeah. No, I've mostly just been busy tonight and yesterday just reading up on stuff for the show.
Any hidden secrets you want to give out, or should we wait till later on?
Well, mostly just really boring statistical stuff.
Oh, okay. So that's more for later on in the show.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those who don't know, there was an urgent debate on on Tuesday, over the change to the response in abuse and care.
Ah, yes.
So let's kick off with the urgent debate where the House's business was set aside. I mean, don't worry, when it comes to next Tuesday, I think we're off to have another one.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So let's kick off with Willow Jean Prime, who's put forward the motion for the urgent debate.
Yeah, I don't think we need the discussions. Behind you there's a discussion. I call on the Honourable Willow Jean Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Soul-destroying is how one survivor responded to the government's shameful redress announcement on Friday. The hundreds of thousands of people who survived abuse and care have a right to feel disappointment and hurt due to this announcement. Mr. Speaker, the final report from the Royal Commission was clear. Survivors wanted an independent redress system, and funneling more money into systems that have harmed them in the past is, without question, the wrong call. Mr. Speaker, we offered to take politics off the table. and to work with the government to make sure we lived up to the words in our formal apologies last year. But the government chose not to take up this offer. We are asking them to reconsider this. We are asking them to reconsider the poor decision they have made on redress and listen to the voices of survivors. Survivors shouldn't still have to be fighting for this. Many are tired of fighting. For too long, survivors have fought to have their voices heard, and it's a disgrace that still, after the formal apologies were made, they are still fighting. This is yet another injustice that survivors of abuse and care are having to deal with. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, said in the Crown apology, quote, "I want to assure you it is our intention to have a new single redress system operating next year." During that speech, Mr. Luxon also acknowledged that many of you, understandably, do not want to engage with the current redress system. Some parts of it are 20 years old, and it can take up to 5 years for your claims to be addressed. The Royal Commission gave clear, very clear guidance to the government that survivors must be involved in designing and implementing this redress system. Survivors have spent decades fighting to be heard. The Royal Commission of Inquiry gave them an opportunity to share their often harrowing stories. It also gave them hope that their immense suffering, pain and trauma would be acknowledged, not only financially, but also through improved access to services and proper apologies. Now, yet again, they feel ignored and silenced, once again harmed by the very state that hurt them so much when they were supposed to be cared for. Mr. Speaker, what this government has delivered. Instead, the government have delivered nothing of what they promised, far from what survivors wanted. What the final Royal Commission report recommended, as survivor Keith Whiffen has put, is another backward step after we were given the opportunity to do something, really good and make a difference that has been ripped away from us. The Royal Commission was very clear survivors needed to be involved in designing and implementing a new independent system for redress. The government has also completely ignored that. Further, survivors of abuse while in the care of faith-based institutions have been excluded and are not eligible to seek redress under the current system. This is contrary to the Royal Commission's recommendation that the redress scheme is accessible to all survivors in state and faith-based care. The reactions to the announcement came through on Friday, Mr. Speaker, from two chapmen describing it as a kick in the guts, many saying they are hugely disappointed, another saying a slap in the face. Disappointed because they had so much hope in the government's words that were delivered in the formal apology, which said that they would set up a new redress system, and to have waited all that time from the apology until Friday, only to be told that that was not the case, that the government was going to simply be putting more money into the system which they have so many issues and grievances with, was for them, in their words, heartbreaking. I have many questions for the Minister. In particular, I want to know how it is that the Minister stood at the announcement and said that she had consulted survivors, that she had worked with survivors, with the high-level design group, that she was clear with them that their proposal was too unique and too ambitious, and that she had said that to them and made that clear to them, because that's not what I understand those who were involved with that understood from any meetings that they had with the Minister. Because if that was so clear, then why did they hold out so much hope that the government this year would announce a new redress system? If it was that clear last year when those conversations were apparently had, then why were they so disappointed in the Minister's announcement on Friday? I want to know what advice the Minister received about establishing an independent redress system. What advice did she receive? When did she receive that advice? What consultation did she do with survivors around the advice that she had received on setting up an independent redress system? When she has said that the high-level design group's report, which she had for well over a year, from the Royal Commission's 2021 report was clear on what redress was required, how can she say that an independent redress system is too difficult and too time-consuming to establish? To be clear, the government has had more time than since the apology to do this work. When did the Minister cut survivors out of the process for the design of what was announced on Friday? And why did the Minister do that? When the Royal Commission and the high-level design group recommended that a foundation of any redress system had to be the active involvement of survivors all along, why did the Minister not do that? When will the Minister release the high-level design group's proposal, Pūtahi Te Mauri he Waiora e? And did she make any attempt to use the design proposals from the high-level design group's proposal, Pūtahi Te Mauri he Waiora e? And what advice did she receive and analysis regarding the high-level design group's proposal, Pūtahi Te Mauri he Waiora e, including aspects of it that can be implemented? Mr. Speaker, in the final minute that I have, I want to reiterate the messages that I again want to repeat. The call from survivors. We ask the government to reconsider their decision. We need to work closely with survivors. It's their voices that matter most on this. We said we'd do right by them, and this announcement is doing wrong. We must listen to their voices, to their experiences of distrust with the current system. Mr. Speaker, this has been, in my view, one of the most harrowing issues to come to this House. And it deserves the House's full attention and this government's proper consideration of truly considering the recommendations from the Royal Commission to redress those wrongs of the past. And so that is my challenge and questions to the Minister.
The Honourable.
How do you dissect that?
Good question. That's what I spent a good portion of yesterday doing. So prepare for a bit of reading from me. I'm sorry, I know you don't like filibustering, Sam, but yeah, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. So I'm going to quote Luxon here because back in November, he stated a number of things. Let me just grab the quote. Yeah, government apologies for abuse and care. Here we go. So this is what Luxon said. I'm pleased to announce today that the government has completed or started work on 28 recommendations in the report. So today I'm announcing the government will invest an additional $32 million to increase capacity in the current system while we work on the new redress system. But I want to assure you that it is our intention to have a new single redress system operating next year. So that's what he said last year. And he also stated that today I'm announcing a National Remembrance Day that will be held on November 12th next year. So November 12th this year, folks, to mark the 1 year anniversary of this apology. So I really do hope that in November this year that people come out and hold Luxon accountable for what has happened, because you're looking through the Royal Commission, right? Luxon said that the government looked at the pros and cons of a new system and there were a couple of issues with it. It takes time to put a new redress system in place. It costs a lot of money, and you've got to be able to guarantee that you can get a better result than what you're doing right now. Now, my statement on this, my commentary on this, is that this would be justifiable if he had not said, but I want to assure you that it is our intention to have a new single redress system operating next year. Because what happens is you've got survivors that are watching Luxon give this apology, right? And when you've got people who are victims of abuse, and a lot of these people have disabilities, they really need assurances and plain language. You can't talk about this shit as if you're addressing a boardroom of shareholders, right? Now, dissecting that statement, but I want to assure you it is our intention, okay? I've been to Massey University. I've studied critical thinking and academic writing. Now, if this was a paper that I read, I would say, okay, there's a lot of hedging words used here. So it's his intention, but it's not a guarantee. Now, for victims of abuse, they may misunderstand that as intention being it is a goal, it is set in stone to have a new single redress system. Now, I had a look at the Royal Commission report, and recommendation 95, it states, the Minister for the Public Service should, within 4 months of tabling this report in the House of Representatives, make public the Crown's initial response to the report's recommendations. And this response should include dates by which Purutumu Torowhainui scheme, so that's the new scheme that's been recommended, will be established and ready to receive claims in civil litigation reforms enacted. So what it appears to me, what Luxon has done, is that he's thrown a date out there, right, into the ether, and it's put a lot of pressure on public servants to deliver something that they don't have the resources to fully develop or deliver within a short time frame.
Sounds like Family Boost.
Yeah. Sorry for the filibustering, guys. I know it's boring going through legal stuff, but it's really important because this is a really important topic. I wanted to get it right.
Okay, shall we see what Erica Stanford says in response?
And their supporters. And I said that waiting had not been easy. And I said that the decisions that we were sharing on the day would come with mixed emotions. And I wanted to reiterate that and also to thank them for all of the time that they had spent on the Royal Commission, many of them sharing their stories and many of them meeting with me and other ministers along the way to share their stories and their views. Mr. Speaker, the announcement on Friday was significant. Let's start with that. More than $750 million, $774 million is a pre-budget announcement, the single largest investment into redress in this country's history. Not only was there the redress part of that announcement, there was also a very significant investment into future-proofing the care system, making sure that we are reducing the numbers of young people and vulnerable people going into care, and when they are in care, making sure that the situations that they're in, the care agencies are strengthened and that they have the ability to let agencies know when things are not going well. So there was a range of announcements there as well, which I'd like to acknowledge. Mr. Speaker, when I announced this on Friday, I also said that I started by saying that nothing that this government would do would take away the pain from what has happened in the past, and we've always acknowledged that. We also acknowledged that there would be many survivors, and it was the same with Lake Alice, who would not feel that what we were announcing met their expectations. We've always acknowledged that as well. But what we have wanted to do with this announcement was to provide clarity, certainty and surety to survivors that we could get something up and running as quickly as we could to provide them with those things. The advice that I had received around creating something new and complex would have taken an extraordinarily long period of time. It would have been very expensive on the one hand. The government and cabinet had to make a call on whether or not we went with something like that, highly complex, very expensive, take a long time, and may not get us the outcomes that we expect. And I think we all know what happens when governments try to create giant, complex, new things. It doesn't always go as planned. Or the other option in front of us was, here are some things that we can do now in moving the system towards that end goal. And it may well be that in the future, we move to an independent system. But here is what we can do now, we can do quickly, we can get in place so that we can prioritise that certainty and surety for survivors and also make those additional top-up payments, create equity across the system, which I'll talk about in a moment. Those were the decisions that were put in front of Cabinet. And we had to make a decision in the best interests of survivors when it came to clarity and certainty and surety about what we could deliver to them. Now, we looked at what the Royal Commission had said in their recommendations, and it was clear that we needed to have something that felt and looked like one system. What we have now, Mr. Speaker, is multiple payment frameworks across multiple agencies with multiple front door entries and multiple people that you must deal with, survivors must deal with along the way. That is not a good system. It is a system that's been in place for 20 years. And we know that that causes frustration and that it's not equitable because we know that certain agencies have got different claims payment frameworks that they use, causing inequities across the system. What we saw from the Royal Commission is we needed to move away from that. And the first step of moving towards something in the future that may well be an independent state is that we had to get something that looked and felt like one single entity. So when a survivor was entering that system, there was one front door. There was one person to deal with. There was one common payment framework and one person you dealt with for all of, sorry, not you, Mr. Speaker, that survivor would deal with for all of their records. And so the intention, what we could do quickly and to give certainty and surety for survivors was to have this common payment framework across the agencies, to have one person they dealt with, one entry, so it feels like when a survivor is entering the system that it is one single entity. That was the intention and the driver behind much of what the Royal Commission said, and we acknowledge that, and that's what we can do now. And we know we can do it well and we can do it quickly. That was the decision that we had. We've got a very current, very complex system. The decision was to create another very complex, large bureaucratic system and then somehow merge these two very large, complex systems together. We've got to remember that other countries, Mr. Speaker, who have been dealing with this are not in the same situation as we are. They have not had a system that has been running for 20 years like we have. Many of them, in fact, almost all of them, are starting from a blank slate from scratch and creating something new. We are in a very different position where we have a very complex, evolved system that we need to get into good shape. And it's not to say, and I said this on the day, Mr. Speaker, that it may well be in the future that we move to an independent state. That will take some time and some cost. What we are doing now is moving in that direction. We announced that the other day, and Mr. Speaker, we know that we've already had a number of people who have come into the system and applied for their top-ups. In saying that, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to note the announcement on the day also was around making sure that we are going back over the historic claims, creating that consistency across the board to making sure that the payments that were paid out under health, for example, are equivalent to those paid under MSD. That was really important to do because we know that there are some agencies who haven't been paying as much over time because the frameworks have been different. That will be equalised. And then all of those people are eligible to apply for a top-up of another 50% on top. And moving forward, Mr. Speaker, claimants who come into the system, the average payment will climb by 50%.
That, as I said earlier, was the single biggest investment in this system. What we are trying to do is create that certainty and surety today, and moving along what I see is a continuum that will have in 2027 a review to make sure that we are looking at the number of claimants coming forward, because it's really hard to pick the numbers, because even the Royal Commission said it could be anywhere between 30,000 and 250,000. We look at the numbers, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, in this announcement we are moving to be able to process more claims every year, and we'll take another look in 2027 to see if we need more resource. There may be future budget bid top-ups, and there may well be decisions made in the future once we've got this more of a single entity in place, that we cannot then take what will be a far less and complex system and shift it into something that is more independent. But that is what we are able to do now and able to do well. Mr. Speaker, I do want to respond to the previous speaker, because I think it's important to note that the previous government received the Royal Commission redress report in December 2021. They had 2 years to implement redress entity if they thought that it was important, but they didn't. In December 2022, they implemented a rapid claims process in MSD, building on the very system they're now criticising for strengthening and investing in, I'm advised they did this without consultation with survivors. And then, Mr. Speaker, 3 months before the last election, they established a redress design group who heroically delivered their report in 5 months. So it is all very rich for the member to stand up and say that we are building on a current system is not appropriate, when the previous government did exactly the same thing after receiving the Royal Commission design report, which stated exactly the things they're talking about today. They had time, if they wanted to do something. They chose to do absolutely nothing, and then they chose to put a group in place to kick the can down the road. We, Mr. Speaker, are investing $774 million. We are creating certainty and surety for survivors, which is far, far more than the previous government ever did.
That felt a bit like we aren't the same as everywhere else in the world, and half of it's the last government's fault.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the inquiry, or the investigation into this new scheme was started under the last Labour government. So it's not like they could have fixed the system before all the evidence and all the data came out. It really, this job has been placed into the National Party's hands and the coalition's hands. So just to comment on what Erica said, she acknowledges that the current redress scheme is not adequate. That's good. But in my opinion, if we look at what Luxon has said on this issue, she really has been pushed into a corner, not just by Luxon, but also Nicola Willis around the budget, right? Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Erica is really kicking herself, because I know this is something that she actually wants to get done. But she's probably being held back from doing it. In my opinion, now victims of state abuse were not consulted or notified about the current status of the redress scheme. They should have been, in my opinion. And one of the reasons that I found that was brought up on this issue was because Erica wanted to save time. So again, that's another problem we're starting to see a theme with this government, is that a lot of ministers are being pushed and pushed and pushed to do things quickly, but not properly. So, and who ends up taking the impact of that brunt? It's victims of abuse. They don't get the care that they need. Now, she stated that, okay, we're going to put a bunch of money, we're going to put millions of dollars into the current scheme. The Minister in charge, Eric Stanford, has announced this month's budget will commit $774 million to improve the current redress system and make changes that will endeavour to prevent, identify and respond to abuse in the future. Now, is this enough? I don't know. I couldn't find any information that provided data on costs around development and implementation. And just to quote what Erica has said on this, she said, I acknowledge that a key recommendation of both the Royal Commission and the Redress Design Group was for a new independent redress entity. So that's the point that she acknowledges, she agrees with. The government was faced with a difficult choice. Do we spend more time and money on setting up a new scheme, or do we provide more to survivors now through the current redress process? Now, again, hey, I'm sitting here, I understand that logic. I'm a utilitarian. You do what needs to be done. The problem is that Luxon has really shot her in the foot with saying we're going to have a new redress system set up next year, which is this year, folks. And then Erica goes on to say, for budget 25, we've prioritised improving the current system as quickly as possible for survivors, investing in changes that have a direct impact for them. So, yeah, I do believe Erica when she says that she wants to get stuff done. Unfortunately, people like Nicola Willis are not making it easy for her, because so far they've been 9,520 public sector cuts, including 419 jobs gone from Oranga Tamariki, which was one of the recommendations in the Royal Commission report, was to expand Oranga services. So how do you expand services when you're cutting jobs? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds a bit like the police numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to Kahurangi Carter.
Call on Kahurangi Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with a heavy heart to address an issue that has long been ignored, long overdue, and continues to fail the very people who deserve the most justice, the survivors of abuse in state and faith-based care. On Friday, the 9th of May, the government made an announcement regarding the redress system for survivors of abuse in state care. They allocated $774 million in the budget 2025 for abuse and care redress claims, a sum that survivors had hoped would bring them justice and healing. Unfortunately, this announcement is another letdown and deeply disappointing for survivors. I've been listening to survivors all weekend. They say they are angry. They say they are sad and that they are strong. There's a class action that has been started around the government's announcement that shows survivors will continue to fight for justice. They shouldn't have to, but they will not stop. The government's response to the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care fails to address key recommendations. These recommendations were worked on for years by experts and survivors to ensure that the Crown is accountable for the abuse to children that occurred on its watch and to ensure that no children are ever abused in care again, something that happens every day in our country, every day. This government's key recommendations, including the creation of an independent survivor-led redress system, and continues to exclude faith-based institutions from the redress process. It's clear to everyone, except the government, that this is not what survivors were promised, nor is it what they deserve. The Prime Minister's words from his apology speech on November the 12th, 2024, he assured survivors that, quote, "It is our intention to have a new single redress system operating next year," end quote. The government's announcement is a continuation of the same broken system, one that failed survivors in the first place. There is no independent survivor-led redress system as promised. Survivors continue to be left in a system governed by the very people and institutions that cause them harm. Of the 138 recommendations made, 105 directly relate to the government. Of these, only 12 were fully accepted. And we're left with a redress process that still fails to include faith-based institutions that horrifically played a major role in the abuse survivors, children, endured. This is not progress, this is deeply unjust. $774 million is woefully insignificant. It fails to meet the scale of harm done to these survivors, these children, and is well below the international standards for compensation. It is tokenistic, it is disrespectful, and it is not enough to make up for the trauma and suffering that these survivors experienced, and the generational trauma that continues today. In the words of Annabelle Ahuriri Driscoll, the co-chair of the Redress Design Group, quote, "The payments processed are still considered lower than other jurisdictions." Ihurangi Dewati Peters says the government's response is another broken promise by this government. Murray Helsley of the Network of Survivors of Faith-Based Abuse stated that faith-based survivors feel that they have not been listened to at all and are being thrown back on the tender mercies of the very institutions that abused them in the first place. Kevin Whiffen expressed that Friday's announcement was topping up an existing rotten process. Carl Tody, spokesperson for NZCAST, New Zealand's largest survivor-led Ropu, said, "We exist because the system that was supposed to protect us failed us, and it's still failing us. I call on the government to return to the table and listen to survivors, and I call on my fellow members of the House to stand with me today in ensuring that the government's response is not the final word on this matter."
Call on.
I mean, of course I agree with her. Look at the hat that I'm wearing. I mean, yeah, she's pretty much said what I just said before. So yeah, again, the new system needs to be an independent Crown entity. That's one of the recommendations, not a departmental public body. So that's very important. The current system is essentially a departmental public body. That's not good, because it means that, you know, victims' claims are not being adequately addressed. So yes, I'm just going to quote the Royal Commission. "The problems with the existing redress processes are well documented. The solution, in our view, is establishing a new Puritumu Torewhanui scheme that is open to all survivors of abuse in state and faith-based care, including indirect state care." Okay, very important key point there. "And is independent of the state. Indirect state care providers and faith-based institutions. So that's not currently happening under the current system. So why does it need to be independent? Because it would avoid the need for survivors to approach the organizations they distrusted. That's really important, right? An interaction many found distressing or traumatizing, and it would also eliminate inherent conflict of interest these organizations faced in investigating themselves. So, yeah, this, Kahurangi Carter, she's right. I can go over the stats of how much of an economic impact state abuse has had. The same stat that I keep posting time and time again, the average lifetime cost to the survivor of the loss of enjoyment of things that New Zealanders think are normal daily activities was estimated in 2019 to be about 673 million. Pardon me, I've got dyscalculia, folks. Sometimes I see the wrong amount of zeros. Almost 80% of the estimated lifetime costs of abuse per survivor, right, is 857,000.
Yeah. Now let's see what the Minister for Children has got to say.
Honourable Karen Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very sensitive topic for many, and if we look at the timeline of the actual inquiry into the abuse in state care, it's quite horrific how long it's actually taken to get to this point for survivors of abuse and care. So if we look when this first began, when we started the inquiry in February 2018, it then took a few years for us to get to the stage where the redress report and recommendations were ready. And the previous government received that redress report and recommendations in December 2021. Then fast forward 2 years into 2024, the report was finally tabled in this House. So the time frame from when the report and recommendations were received in December 2021 to the time it was even tabled in Parliament was quite distressing for survivors in itself, because knowing that those recommendations were ready and knowing that the previous government had an inkling of what was required by survivors for 2 years, before this report was even tabled. You would have thought, even though it wasn't tabled publicly in those 2 years, that the previous government would have been making plans in the background of what they were actually going to do in response once this was tabled. But unfortunately, the only response that happened, from what I can tell, is that rapid claims were looked into through MSD, the current system that survivors were saying very loud and clear was not a system that they were happy with. So fast forward to now, when, as a government, we are very committed to victims of crimes of sexual harm and violence. We want to make sure that we get this right for survivors in care. My response to this is looking at the $774 million investment into the redress system and also strengthening the care-based system to prevent, identify and respond to abuse in the future. Is a good start, because at least we've laid out in black and white in a short time frame of what we are actually going to do, not only for survivors of abuse in state and faith-based care in the past, but what we're going to do in the future to prevent them from happening again. Because, Madam Speaker, to be perfectly honest, compensation is not just about money. Redress is not just about money. It's also about knowing that our voices are being heard, that the hurt and harm that has been brought to this House and put in black and white in a report of what has happened, that their voice mattered and counted towards making sure that governments in the future and agencies in the future are doing everything they possibly can to prevent that harm from happening again, which is what this government has made a commitment to doing. We are in the process of implementing a seamless service so that survivors with claims with multiple agencies now will have the ability to have those claims managed by one point of contact. Now, Madam Speaker, that is not a separate system in itself, but quite frankly, I would rather that all of that $774 million be invested into the survivors than building up a new system that may take years when these survivors have waited long enough to have their claims addressed. We may not even know if creating a new system will make that better in the future. This is not saying that we can't do this in the future, but just making sure that we address this as quickly as possible, allow claimants to make their claims, allow claimants that have previously made claims to have top-ups as quickly as possible, so that we're not dragging them through what's next for more years to come. Because, Madam Speaker, that is actually worse than doing something right now. And we need to make sure that we are doing something now, that we are showing our commitment, and that moving forward we are committing to make sure that this kind of horror does not continue into the future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thanks, Speaker.
Okay, Yeah, I apologise to people if you hear me tapping away in the background because it's like, I got to write down all these notes. Yeah, so my question to Karen is, what data does she have to support the claim that the new system will not improve outcomes for victims? I don't even think Erica Stanford would agree with what she just said, because Erica's out here saying, yeah, I acknowledge that we need a new redress scheme. And then Karen Chor is like saying, well, guys, what would you prefer? Money to go to victims or a new system? But that's a false dilemma fallacy that she's just put forward. And also the problem here, right? She's trying to ignore the problem that Luxon came out and said, we're going to have a new redress scheme by this year. Where is it? That's a problem. That's a problem for survivors of abuse. So it's a big problem. And also, I've just opened up the timeline of inquiry because she was talking about 2001, 2001. Okay, all right. Let's go through the timeline. So under the last Labour government, so in 2018, the Prime Minister announced the Royal Commission of Inquiry and appointed one member to undertake consultation on draft terms of reference. Okay, let's go to 2021. What's happening during that period? Well, we were having hearings. We were having faith-based redress hearings. Oh, and that's excluding the fact that COVID-19 did impact data collection. But yeah, so in 2021, we had hearings that were done. Okay. Then 2022, we had more hearings. Okay, very important. I mean, hey, credit to Labour. They like getting evidence for stuff. 2023, okay, more inquiries were done. Very good. And then we get to 2024, June, final report of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Historical Abuse and State Care. So that was presented, right? And then you get to November and Luxon's like saying, okay, we're going to have a new thing by next year, or which is now this year. So that's the timeline. So I just want people to keep that in mind. I have put the link in the chat that people can look at for themselves so they can see the timeline. There you go, guys. You can click on that. And check it out for yourself. You know, that's what you got to do with a lot of these politicians. You've got to check their claims. When they cite something, they make a claim.
Yeah.
Go look at it. You know, do your own research. This is how you how to do your own research properly. Okay?
So true. Okay, let's get to the Honourable Casey Costello.
Speaker, and it is, I think, timely to recognise, as the Minister reflected, that this is a difficult and troubling process that we have to work through, and it is a process that has sat around for a long time to seek resolution. And will there be a perfect answer? Will there be the ability to rectify the harm that was done? I would suggest not. We have a very difficult task ahead, and the perfect solution does not exist, because every single individual that has been harmed, that has been damaged, has their own individual story, their own individual expectations. And our job in this House and in this government is to try and wade through with a clarity that will provide some direction, some trajectory under which we can seek to diminish the challenges that are being faced by these individuals. And I think it is really important that we do not use this as a political football to kick around this House, using those very voices that we need to be listening to, and we actually look at how we can make these decisions reflective of the voices that you're hearing, and how we can continue to develop a process. As the Minister has outlined, we are not at an end point, we are on a journey. But what this government had to do was make some decisions about a pathway forward. They had been waiting long enough. And is it the perfect solution? We will not know, because every single person, as I said, has their own expectations and their own harms to heal. But what we do know, rather than heckling in this House, is that we have invested $774 million into a process, into redress, into something that is tangible, that we can say there are some actions underway. And it is tragic that we are not revisiting this message over and over again, that we are on a pathway. And this is a solution that we will work on, that we will develop. But this end point, this new system, this new redress system, as we've said repeatedly in this House, there is no perfect system, but we could have spent an inordinate amount of time trying to develop this new redress system. But what we do have is something that we can hear what have been the issues and what have been the frustrations, the single point of entry, the time it's taken to be processed. All of those things have been taken into account as we have discussed this issue. And therefore, we are trying to fix those things to ensure that this money is directed where it needs, that we are increasing the average payments, that we are topping up payments to survivors so there is an equity. We are providing higher payments for those where there has been the highest level of egregious harm. We are increasing the capacity to process those claims. As I've said, a single point of entry into the system. And we have established an independent review and access to support. These are not small things. This has been an incredibly tough decision. And we cannot risk harming those who are seeking support and guidance by making this all about what has missed out and not about what is being delivered. And we will continue to listen. And I would say really categorically, as I have stood beside the Minister talking to these survivors about their journeys and their stories, every single story is individual and every single story has been listened to. But can we meet everybody's expectations? Unfortunately not. But what we can do, instead of sitting in a paralysis of the perfect solution, is not let that perfect be the enemy of the good. And we have to make sure that we do something. And that is the discussion that we should be having.
Māori Mino Kapakingi.
Tēnā koe, Madam.
For those who are wondering why I'm a bit quiet, it's more the sensitivity of the subject, and I don't feel that I am probably the best expert to rage.
Well, I mean, yeah, look, I mean, I can rage if people want me to. But yeah, like you said,
it's not appropriate to rage.
Yeah, I mean, if you see me get angry, folks, it's not. It's to do with the level of action that has been failed to take place, because I do care about victims, right? So that's, if you see me get angry, that's the reason why. Now, she's out here, Casey Costello is out here saying the perfect solution does not exist. Well, here's the thing. No one is asking for a perfect solution. Why are you even saying that? What they're asking for is that the recommendations made by the Royal Commission are upheld. They're just, they're asking for reparations, and they are, if the state abuses you, yes. Like I said, I've gone over the numbers again of how much it's cost victims.
It's quite a horrific number, and like what it ends up doing for someone, because I mean, if you've been abused, it affects many things in life, and not everyone ends up in, say, the fortunate position of becoming the Minister of Children over the government department that looked after you as a kid. Most people, some end up homeless, some end up in social housing, psych wards. The list goes on, and it's not exactly a simple, clear-cut fix in order to make things work either. It's a very touchy subject. And I mean, you do get people who think they're an expert in things as well, an expert in your care, and get it horribly wrong. And
I mean, we can go back to looking at Casey Costello's history as a detective. She's had to deal with some very horrific cases.
Yeah.
So I find it really frustrating when she says the perfect solution does not exist. Again, no one's asking for, heaven on earth. What they're asking for is that the recommendations by the Royal Commission are upheld, and that National upholds their commitment to creating a new scheme. Luxon put his foot in his mouth by saying, hey, we're going to have this awesome scheme, this brand new scheme that's going to make lives better, and give people the reparations and the justice they need. We're going to have this new scheme by next year. Where is it? I mean, look, I understand. I get the utilitarian argument that Erica Stanford has put forward. It's like, it's better to do something than to do nothing. I agree. But you need to get a new leader, because he's screwing you guys over. It's same with Nicola Willis. She's screwing you guys over with the budget and all the cuts to public sector jobs. How are you supposed to get anything done? Yeah.
And just for those who are wondering why Parliament, as you would see in that shot there, a lot of it is empty, is the fact that many of those members in Parliament have to also go to other commitments like select committees, dealing with preparing speeches for different points in their other things in there. So and considering this was a debate without notice, it wasn't planned. So as you see there, you probably end up with a bit more of a skeleton style approach of who's actually in there.
Yeah, and again, like you said, this debate wasn't, ministers were not made aware of this debate ahead of time.
Yeah.
That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
That's a big problem because you've got Nicola Willis. She's I don't know what she's doing. She's listening to lo-fi hip hop at 3 a.m. in the morning, writing out the budget. But she's made all these commitments, and unfortunately, people are going to suffer as a result of that. When you look at tax cuts for landlords, you look at tax cuts for corporations, who ends up suffering? It's the people at the bottom.
Yeah.
And this is just another example of that. I mean, Casey Costello is out here saying, we can't turn this into a football. I'm sorry, but your coalition has, because of the budget and the cuts to public sector roles.
Yeah.
You turned it into a football. Didn't have to work. It didn't have to turn out this way.
Yeah. Okay. Was it Matamino Kapakingi?
Speaker, tēnā tātou te whare. When I first spoke on this take, I guess the gallery was full. And apart from a number of things that I said, I do remember saying this, and I know that it landed, not only with the House, but particularly with the gallery. I said, because we apologise here in the House does not mean that you have to be ready to forgive us. And that point is still so real in my mind, in my heart, Madam Speaker, and I want to land it here again and ask all of us, particularly government, to consider this. The best definition that I've ever heard of forgiveness, by the way, is this. The best definition, to give up your right to resent. The definition, to give up your right to resent. There's not a single thing in the announcement that says to me and to the many that we know and that are survivors of this, Madam Speaker, would consider this a reason to give up their right to resent. In fact, what it does say is continue to hold the resentment until the forgiveness is clear and shown in the announcement and anything that this government will do. So I want to make those points as I open up my discussion. To say this is a violent regime of disrespect against survivors. When I was listening to some of the discussion earlier, the words, this is investment, 744 million of investment, like we're doing you a favour. It's such a strange word to use, the word investment, when this is about harm and trauma that have been caused to so many. So, well, here's the 30k payout. This is and used it as an investment discussion. I don't understand that, and I find it strange and offensive, actually. So let's say that, I'll repeat it, $744 million split across 200,000 survivors of abuse in state and faith-based care. Equates to only 30 each. That's your total compensation for state-sanctioned abuse. Sorry about it. That has completely derailed the lives of survivors and in actual fact derailed the lives of generations following. That inquiry was meant to be a turning point of transformational change, but this coalition government has chosen to continue the legacy of abuse. To say as well, I was listening to it again, this to not turn this into a political football. Let me say that there are many a whānau and family member that as they get into that house and make this discussion, whether it's political football. I mean, I don't even understand that idea. Everything that we do in this house and say in that house has to carry some power and importance so that our family do go, yeah, Minno, you're saying what we need you to say, so don't back off saying it, whether it's a political point or not. Make our voice heard in this house. So that is why I'm standing to talk to this issue today. I want to mihi tū for actually raising it in this way, Madam Speaker, and to bring this to another opportunity to call to change the minds of government, to go from your head to your heart and understand what this means for family and whānau. This government has offered band-aids for bullet wounds, and the minister should be ashamed, deeply ashamed, just as every other complicit member of parliament in the coalition government should be too, because to reject the findings, let me just say that again, to reject the findings of the commission is to reject the truth. Te Pāti Māori remains unwavering, Madam Speaker, in this commitment to justice. We will continue to fight this, we will continue to name it, and we will continue to reject it and to say the names and the voices, bring the voices of our whānau to the House. Good intentions, and I heard that phrase earlier too, good intentions is simply not enough. It is the road to future harm and hell, and that we stand as Pāti Māori and reject the ongoing position and the ongoing harm and abuse in care. Madam Speaker, tēnā koe.
Always when I hear Maria Minno, she always gets the terminology right on a lot of words. She comes up with some very good analogies, such as putting band-aids over bullet wounds. That is a very good way of putting it in there. As people who have experienced abuse, trying to put a band-aid over it or trying to sweep it under the carpet does not sit down there and move things away from where it is. It feels like there's a sense of injustice and a lack of accountability, and just sits there and festers.
Yeah, so Maria Mino, she's such an elegant speaker. She's a very good kai kōrero. But yeah, I just want to, it goes back to the history of, and I know people are going to freak out when I say this word, it goes back to the history of colonialism in New Zealand. Because a lot of the people that were brought into state care were Māori, okay? And iwi and hapu did not have the level of involvement with those kids in state care as much as they should have. And as a result, you got tamariki, rangatahi, and Pākiki Māori, right? So that's all your kids and your teenagers and stuff. They were deprived of learning about te ao Māori, Mātauranga Māori, and learning te reo Māori, and a lot of these really important things that they need to have cultural connection with the land. Okay, so they were kind of forced to integrate into Pākehā society through a really traumatic way of being ripped away from their iwi and hapu and their families. You know, that is very traumatic. And as a result of doing that, is it any wonder why Māori are upset? They've been alienated. They've been essentially, a good portion of Māori, especially those of the older generations, are broken, right? As a result of urbanisation, of being taken away from the land and not being stripped away from things that are culturally important to them. You know, you can't just go up to a Māori person or any Indigenous person and go, here, Pākehā solution. Because it's like you're basically taking a human and throwing them into an alien world.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just slap. I mean, yes, there are similarities. Sure, we can nitpick about that, but being disconnected from traditions that you grew up with or that you were raised with, or being disconnected from that familial love and care, does do damage to your psyche. Holy shit. Like, you look at the amount of money that you know, again, you know, we can go over the stats. The average lifetime cost of survivor of the loss of enjoyment of things that New Zealanders think are normal daily activities in 2019 is estimated to be about 673,000. Almost 80% of the estimated lifetime cost of abuse per survivor, almost 80% of the lifetime costs of abuse per survivor of 857,000. Okay? And a lot of those costs, the burden of that cost is on the victim. Victims of state abuse. And also, I got to highlight, and this is why I'm really annoyed and pissed off and angry with Karen Shaw. This is why Section 7AA is so important, to prevent this shit from happening again. And she's out here going, no, we need to do the same shit what happened in the past. Bring back the boot camps, you know, start breaking apart hapus again in whānau involvement. We're going to break all that shit, and you're just going to get another repeat of this. It's just all bullshit.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what Helen White has to say.
Helen White. Thank you. I'm really concerned about what we are talking about today, because I think it shows that the government is ignoring the lessons learned from the people who are affected by this, who went before a royal commission and told their stories. That is of deep concern when a government this new has forgotten how to listen, has forgotten how to connect with the very people that the government, and we are the government that was responsible for state care, the government caused that harm. And it has immediately turned around and done something that is offensive to those people immediately. It's only 18 months in, and this is where it's at this incredibly insensitive level. What people said to that inquiry was that they had absolutely no faith in the current system. They said it wasn't independent, it wasn't informed by the trauma that they'd been through. It did things like delayed matters, it belittled them and minimised what was going on. We had an issue come up last year where we were talking about the role of the state when there was a prosecution on issues of sexual abuse and this kind of violence, and how the Crown prosecutor had looked at that situation, the Solicitor General, and tried to minimise what had happened, denied claims, because that's what they thought their job was as Solicitor General. That is what happens when you don't have anyone independent in a role, when you confuse your role. That is what happens. And it caused so much harm to so many people. And we had a real commission that did incredibly good work, and it came out with a finding. It said that what had to replace this system was a survivor-led, survivor-designed redress system. Now, I have heard the Minister talk about how today she said it was only that we were trying to create one single entity system and that was too difficult in the time frame. I've heard another Minister say that we can't wait for the perfect system. I don't think many survivors in this country expect the perfect system. I think they expect a half-decent system, a system that doesn't re-traumatise them. And it's our job, because we lead this country, to do a better job of giving them what they need, because we, the state, hurt these people, and we did despicable things. This is not something that we can take lightly. This is what we're here to do, to lead. So I reject the characterisation of this debate and the objection of the opposition to what has been announced as somehow looking for a perfect solution. I reject that. It is really important that we face this practically. Practically, we needed a new system. And the reality is that this government is not going to give a new system that actually helps people and doesn't harm them to the survivors of this terrible atrocity, because that's what it is. It's an atrocity. We need a system that doesn't traumatise people. Now, I went to see something recently. It was the Pahutakawa Centre. It's a clinic that deals with people who have been raped, basically, and sexually abused. And one of the doctors said to me, the thing about this system is people come out a little bit healed. That is the measure that we should be looking at. We should be trying to create a system that brings about a little bit of healing for people we have seriously harmed. I just wanted to end with a statement that I read from a person reacting to the coverage on this. It was a person in a newsroom article. He said, torture and abuse, including being repeatedly abused by the legal system, and a resultant lifetime of despair is worth $30,000. Actually, that's for very few of the claimants. They mainly would get 3. I might be a little naive, although I don't believe so, but put this up against $2.9 billion tax break for landlords, and it doesn't appear that this government has any moral compass. Thank you.
Honourable Louise Upston.
I mean, at this moment, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I mean, again, the current system is not adequate. Maria Meno Kapakingi is correct when she said that what this government is doing by putting more funds into the current redress system is equivalent to putting bandages over bullet wounds. Yeah. And Helen White, she brings up the same point that I did about it's not about having a perfect system. It's about following the recommendations that the Royal Commission put through and following through on what Luxon said about bringing about a new redress scheme this year. Preferably, that is I'm not even going to say preferably. That must be an independent Crown entity, not a departmental public body. Okay, that is survivor led, right? Again, I've put the link to the establishment of a new Peritumu Torowhanui scheme, right? So people can look at that and they can see the recommendations for themselves, right? It's about following through on stuff and looking after the people who have been abused by the state.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to Louise Upston.
I want to start as I did on the day of the Crown apology by acknowledging the survivors, and in particular to acknowledge that far too many were deaf and disabled New Zealanders who were abused in care. And I want to put very carefully on the record, Madam Speaker, the enormous time and energy that the Minister in charge of the government response, the Honourable Erica Stanford, has put into this. And the comments from the other side to suggest that she hasn't wholeheartedly listened to survivors, met with them, heard their views, and although many of those views differed, to then try to find a way through that will never satisfy everybody's concerns, but satisfied enough for us to at least make a start in righting the wrongs. So I do want to acknowledge the Honourable Erica Stanford, and, you know, as many members across this House have done, those of us who have met with survivors and listened to them are only acutely aware that no amount of redress will take away the trauma that was inflicted upon them. And so it is in that context, Madam Speaker, that navigating a way through where, you know, one of the very common threads that survivors have said is they are sick of waiting. And that was a big consideration in the government working out, you know, this completely new redress system that actually wouldn't have got any redress out the door in the short term. The challenge of that was actually too great for us to accept. And so that's why by listening to the survivors, by listening to the things that they prioritised in terms of making it simpler, making it easier, giving them one point of contact. Some of the key parts in the improvements that have been made have been absolutely in response to the feedback they gave. Is it perfect? It never will be. There will never be a perfect solution to this. But actually, the opposite side of the chamber can't just sit there and say this is about the government's intentions. We've actually announced a significant way forward, which is a start. And no amount of money will ever take away what has happened to a group of New Zealanders that it should never, ever have happened to. But instead, we need to focus on practical things that will mean that we can make progress in redress. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, because the team at the Ministry of Social Development who have dealt with claims already, and actually on Friday with the announcement, as of 2 p.m. yesterday, had almost 350 top-up applications. That is delivering for survivors. As I said, it may not be perfect, but it is a very important start in improving what we have. And I do want to also put on record, Madam Speaker, the team that I have met, who are the ones who are at the end of the phone, who are that one point of contact, are an extraordinary group of New Zealanders and public servants who get up every day to provide support and assistance to survivors of state care. And I want to put on record my thanks to them. There is more work to do, significantly so, and the Minister outlined that. And I also want to make clear, as she asked me to pass on, we still are yet to make decisions about those who are abused in faith-based environments. Madam Speaker, this is an enormous piece of work. It won't just be our government, but governments of the future. And I think we should focus on the survivors, not on politics.
Glenn.
Okay, I'm just going to go mask off of this one. What a load of fucking bollocks. What a weak response. You know, she's like, oh, I want to acknowledge survivors. No. You acknowledge survivors by apologising that the 2025 budget and the public sector cuts have resulted in the new redress scheme being delayed, right? Stop making excuses. Own that shit. Own it, right? You've already owned it by saying, oh, yeah, we've cut public sector jobs 9,520 so far, right? Stop making excuses because people are not falling for that shit. And she's out here, again, like everyone else, oh, there's no perfect system. No one is asking for perfection. They are asking you to uphold the commitment that Luxon put forward in November last year. And I quote, but I want to assure you that it is our intention to have a new single redress system operating next year. Okay? You chose not to do it. You chose to cut the public sector jobs. You chose to make tax cuts a priority. You didn't choose to make this a priority. You had choices, you made choices, and now people are suffering because of those choices.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what Glenn Bennett's got to say.
For us on this side of the House, it is about the survivors we stand today. It is about the survivors that my colleague, the Honourable Willa-Jean Prine, put in a request for a debate because the survivors have been asking us, have been pleading with us to actually speak up and speak out in this House around what we can be doing to do what is right. What is right. It's not easy doing what is right. It is not cheap doing what is right, but to honour, to help in the restoration of mana for so many survivors, it is about doing the right thing. That is why we on this side of the House stand. That's why we on this side of the House are doing our best to be a voice and to push government. It is to be political. It is to be political for the right decisions to be made. When just under a year ago the Royal Commission report was presented in this House, the byline of it was through pain and trauma, from darkness to light. From darkness to light. And that is the challenge we are wanting to continue debate in this House, but as we move forward, how do we move from that darkness into that light? And it is about an apology, but it also is about us as the state, us making bold, courageous and difficult decisions to restore mana for those who was lost often for many of them many years ago due to what we as a state, we as the church have done. And it was a couple of weeks ago, I turned on Whakata Māori and saw the documentary, The Stolen Children of Aotearoa. And for anyone who hasn't seen that documentary, which follows a number of survivors, I challenge you to watch it. It is not easy to watch, but it creates It creates more of the story. It creates a depth of the story for understanding for us, not only as a parliament, for us as a community, to look at what we can be doing because of what we did do in terms of how we ignored and how we swept this under the carpet for so long. And I just want to challenge the government, and I want to challenge the Prime Minister directly in my contribution this afternoon, as he stood in this House with a full gallery, with this Parliament full of survivors who heard him apologise last year. And I want to quote him, because he said, "I know that financial redress is important to many of you, and no amount of money will ever make up for what you have endured." And then we went on to say, Madam Speaker, that many of you, understandably, do not want to engage with the current redress system. He said that, the Prime Minister, he acknowledged it. And he also committed to this year, in 2025, establishing a new single redress system that will be operating in the year to come. Well, we're in that year, and then last Friday, survivors are handed what the government handed them, and it's not okay. We look at what the Royal Commission recommended as well, Madam Speaker, and they also talked very clearly about the fact that survivors are looking and needing a system that is designed specifically for them to be independent, for the redress to be meaningful. Because why would you go back to your oppressor with your hand out asking for some crumbs? Why would there not be a separate system set in place, Madam Speaker? And finally, I just want to reflect on the survivors. And as I watched that documentary, we heard people speak who were in the Ipuni Boys' Home. We heard people speak who were in other spaces like Kimberley and Lake Alice. And those were institutions that this Parliament ratified and supported. And we need to come back to the survivors. We need to come back to those places that this system allowed to establish and say no more, because we need to look forward. We need a separate system, and we need the government to do what they said they were going to do and create a new system.
God, as I'm writing notes when people are talking, the notes are just getting more and more and more aggressive. As I listen.
Oh, I'm not surprised. I mean, what do you expect when you just want to rage while trying to keep that rage within because of the sensitive nature of the topic?
Yeah, I mean, look, what can I say other than the coalition turned this into a political debate by making the choices they did. And these choices, they all add up. They chose to prioritise tax cuts for like tobacco companies and landlords. They chose the second-hand fucking helicopters, the melted plastic lunches, the boot camps, the charter schools that no one fucking wants, the treaty principles bill that went nowhere. You know, they could have chosen to go guns blazing, creating a new redress scheme that is independent, Crown entity and survivor-led, but they didn't. They didn't. They chose to cut public sector jobs that
could have done the work.
They could have done the work, but they didn't. And look, I understand Erica Stanford making the utilitarian argument of, well, you know, shit happened, I'm doing the best I can. Look, I understand where Erica is coming from, but that doesn't really work for survivors when you got Luxon standing up making stupid statements.
Yeah.
You can't, you can't, I'm sorry, your boat is flooded. You can't pail the water out with a cup, right? The damage is done. You're fucked.
Yes, exactly.
The Titanic has hit the iceberg.
Yeah. You've gone past the point of no return in many cases. Yeah. Do we try Joseph Mooney or do we just save the rage?
No, bring him on.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak in this urgent debate this afternoon, and I want to take the opportunity at the outset to acknowledge again, so I've had the opportunity to speak on this topic before, the survivors, Madam Speaker, and the hurt and the pain that they've experienced and their justifiable desire to see this appropriately acknowledged by this House. And money doesn't solve all things, but certainly it is an important part of the redress process. And this government, Mr Speaker, has committed the single biggest investment in this pre-budget announcement recently given for redress in this country's history. So that is the single biggest investment for redress in this country's history, $774 million, Mr Speaker. I note the concerns that are being addressed and have been raised in response to this urgent debate, which is the concern that there isn't a independent organisation that's responsible for that redress system and the redress payments. But the government was faced with a difficult choice, Mr Speaker. Does the government spend more time and money on setting up a new scheme, or does it provide more to survivors now through the current process? And that's through the current redress process. And the decision of the government, Mr Speaker, was to ensure that as much of that $774 million that is going to go towards redress would go directly towards those affected, rather than spending that additional money and time on setting up an independent process Now, I do note that was the survivors' concerns were carefully taken into consideration. The survivors' concerns that trust and confidence in redress is certainly integral to ensuring a positive claim resolution, and concerns of the survivors that the state claims process would be managed by the same institutions that were responsible or had agreed care responsibility for survivors, which the Royal Commission found had contributed to low trust regarding the integrity of claims outcomes. To address that concern, Mr Speaker, there will be a process for an independent review of claims if survivors are unhappy with the decision and the redress payment that is being offered. So that is an important component of this to ensure there is an additional mechanism to address concerns if survivors have those about the way that the system is interacting with them. I would note, Mr Speaker, that this $774 million package includes increasing the average redress payments for new claims from $19,180 to $30,000. So it's a significant increase in the average redress payments for new claims that this package enables. And that is part of making sure that this additional money can go to survivors through this. It's also providing for higher payments for the survivors who experience the most egregious abuse, providing top-up payments of 50% to survivors who have already settled claims to ensure consistency with increased payments for new claims. And is introducing a common payments framework so that survivors receive the same financial redress for similar experiences of abuse, regardless of where in state care that abuse occurred. There's also increasing the system capacity, Mr Speaker, to process claims from 1,350 to 2,150 per year from 2027 to reduce wait times for current claimants, because the government recognises that time is moving and the government wishes the time to move quickly to get those payments to survivors. It's also implementing a seamless service so that survivors with claims with multiple agencies have those claims managed by one point of contact. And it's introducing a single entry point for survivors wanting to register new claims, as well as what I mentioned before, introducing an independent review. An independent review is important for people who are unhappy with their redress offer, and there's also funding for redress agencies to provide survivors with access to supports and services. I would also note, Mr Speaker, that a real concern of survivors is around ensuring that there's a prevention, identification and response to any abuse in the future to try to stop this from happening again. And so this package also includes investments in the wider care system over the next 4 years, including such things as $71.5 million to build a capable and safe care workforce for children and vulnerable adults, and over $50 million to make mental health inpatient units safer and improve privacy and dignity for patients. And there's more, but I run out of time, but this is a very good package, Mr Speaker.
The time for this debate has expired.
Yeah, hold your horses, Greg. I haven't expired yet, not on this topic. All right, so, it's, again, I'm just getting sick and tired of rich people standing up saying, money doesn't solve things. Well, hey, bro, I've got news for you. You know what money can do? It can buy shit like therapy and help survivors live the lives that they were denied, by the state. And speaking of money, why are we wasting the money that could go towards victims of abuse, state abuse? Why are we wasting that money on things like boot camps and private prisons, things that are going to carry on the trajectory of state abuse? And why are we doing dumb shit like trying to get rid of Section 7AA that reduced the number of kids going into state care? Why are we saying sorry when we're doing the same dumb shit that resulted in this outcome?
Yeah, exactly. But what do you expect?
They're just saying at this point, they might as well just be saying at this point, sorry, we got caught. It's like, just the only one that I think has a genuine apology out of all of that I just heard was probably from Erica. Everyone else is just like, well, system's not perfect. Nothing we can do. Teehee, need to spend money on buying secondhand helicopters and plastic, fucking melted plastic lunches and charter schools that no one wants and a treaty principles bill to nowhere. It's just like, fuck.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the more serious part of the show, the Social Security's Amendment Bill.
You got to push the button.
Okay. That gets rolling. I thought I clicked the key over, but yes, you are right. I've done that again. I did it last week as well. Okay, let's kick it off. Ricardo.
Robust and long bell, and so I'll try to go clause by clause as much as I can, and I'll flag when I'm speaking to amendments as well. But yeah, just to make sure that it's in order. So I want to start with clause 5 of part 1, particularly clause 5, which amends section 21 in relationship to work gap, and that's repealing Section 21(3). And I wanted to ask the Minister about what is the policy intent, and I asked this because that didn't actually get a lot of scrutiny in the Select Committee, nor was it something that the Minister publicly talked about. But the bill effectively is doing away with a specific definition of work gap in a provision, which if we look at the Social Security Act, the work gap would include, for example, that somebody is considered to have that if a person is receiving job seeker support at the rate in other clauses and during a temporary period the person engages in full-time employment, and the income from that employment and the person's other income, if any, when calculated over a 52-week period, is less than the amount that would, under the appropriate income test, reduce the applicable rate of the job seeker support to 0. And I guess our concern is that, like, rather than, I guess, just changing the 52-week to potentially, for example, 26 weeks, the Minister's just done away with it. We think this is problematic because it would effectively reduce the number of particularly single parents who are eligible for job seeker support, and in some ways it also disincentivizes engaging in employment because of the narrowing definition of a work gap. I wanted to start with that because it also ties in with an amendment that we have, which would that is under my name, to delete that clause 5 in and of itself. And the amendment for us means that basically we would ensure that single parents who temporarily engage in full-time employment, where the income from that employment would not reduce the applicable rate of job seeker support to 0, they can continue to be considered to have a work gap and remain eligible for support, notwithstanding any other eligibility criteria. The bill, particularly if we think about, for example, the debates on the first and second reading, a lot of it has been in relationship to the additional non-financial sanctions, and which I will touch on later. But this change to the what is considered to be work gap has not actually given much mentioned by the Minister, and I think actually the public should have it on the record as to why the Minister is narrowing this definition and taking away one of the specific provisions and that helps define somebody having a work gap. I'm really concerned about the negative impacts that this could have on people. And I wonder whether this very specific clause, what the intent is simply to therefore narrow the scope of who then would be eligible for a benefit, which in and of itself then reduces the amount eligible for a benefit, which then in turn may help meet the government meet its target of having less people on the benefit. But that doesn't necessarily mean more people in full-time employment or ongoing full-time employment. And so I'm keen to understand particularly what is the policy intent, what level of consultation she had on the work gap, because we didn't actually, the Minister didn't talk about those changes in the Select Committee, nor in her public communications. So I think that part deserves a bit more commentary from the Speaker. I'm also interested to see if she would be supportive of her amendment that would remove that clause 5, because we actually think, despite our political and ideological differences, that actually that we see this as actually disincentivizing employment. And so I think this is just feels like an odd thing to be putting forward in the bill. So really eager to start off the debate with clause 5, and I will then go on to other parts of this piece of legislation as we go to. I also wanted for the Chair, while I've got that 1 minute left, just to flag that I recognise that and when we start getting into clause 10 onwards and we talk the different non-financial sanctions, that I know that the language is relatively similar, but I want to float that I may be touching on some of those things that may sound repetitive, but the benefit sanctions are different. So the way that the language ends up applying to the specific benefit sanctions will be different. So I just want to preemptively flag that in case I'm referring to language that may sound similar in writing, but the policy intent is different.
Honourable Louise Upston.
Madam Chair, I just thought it would be useful if I provide some opening comments and context. This is a really simple bill. There's really only 4 changes that we're making in terms of non-financial sanctions. I think some of the impressions that may have been left by opposition members in their comments in earlier readings may be misunderstood. So let me first say, no one is sanctioned if they can't find a job. There are obligations in terms of people being available for work, looking for work, attending meetings with their case manager, attending sessions at MSD. So this is all about the rights and responsibilities, ensuring that those who are on job seeker benefits, for example, are taking the steps they need to. And unlike the current settings that had been unchanged for the 6 years of the Labour Greens government, we are adding sanctions that are non-financial. So at the moment, the only ability is to either reduce a benefit in half or end it completely. These 4 new non-financial sanctions mean the entire amount of the benefit is retained, and there are just a couple of changes. The clause that the member refers to is also related to a 26-week reapplication. We want to ensure that people continue to be eligible for the benefit type they are on, and again that's a very simple change that we've made. So Madam Chair, I do want to make it clear this is not a complex piece of legislation. It's been through a full Select Committee process, and I'm confident that we can get through it quite easily.
It is not a simple bill, Louise. It sounds simple in the great sense, but it doesn't take the fact of the reality of a beneficiary's life with MSD. You know, you might have one case manager go, well, it doesn't matter that your bus was late. Maybe you should have caught the one earlier that was cancelled. oh, I don't believe that you can. So you can show me the Metlink thing, but I don't care because at Work and Income, when I'm the person who's the judge, I'm right and you're wrong. And when you're dealing with someone like that, like when you're, as not Bernadette said earlier, your abuser being your judge and jury, how do you ensure that you're going to sit there and, not have the sanctions abused? I put in a submission to make sure that if sanctions were abused, there were compensation measures in place. If sanctions were issued that could not be dealt with in a timely manner or challenged, they automatically reverse. Because in a normal situation, it is innocent until proven guilty. Not innocent, not guilty, I don't care about your innocence, as it often is at the Work and Income office. It sounds great, but until you deal with dickhead case managers who possibly shouldn't be in a job, making bad decisions that contradict the law on the basis of, but I'm not accountable for my actions and I'm immune, then, people aren't going to have trust in the system. Anyone who has been, taken advantage of, used, abused by a government agency, they sit there and do it. If you talk to a whole heap of, parents who pay child support, they have a vendetta against the IRD. If you had people who have been abused by the mental health system, they have a vendetta against the mental health system. I do remember that back in the days when they used to call it child, youth and family, someone sat there and had her baby taken off her, and so she went and built down the SIF's office as retaliation. It sounds great and simple in theory, but in practice, Louise, it is going to be a big motherfucking letdown. You don't usually get me saying the F word on here, because even at times I'd like to sit there and say it, I do hold back. But, experience speaks volumes.
Yeah, I'm going to quote Frozen. Let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Okay, so that's what Sam did. Okay, so speaking to what Louise Upston just said, I found it very funny. She said, no one is sanctioned if they can't find a job. I'd like to know what her definition of job is, because one of the non-financial sanctions is, well, you've got to do volunteer work. Right, I'm sorry. I called that a job, volunteer work. It's the definition of job something that you get money for, because that is something that could be exploited. I read the Citizens Advice Bureau's submission, and I put the link to that submission in the chat just earlier. But they stated that that their concerns about the proposed community work experience sanction in the bill, which involves making a person work unpaid for at least 5 hours per week at a not-for-profit organisation. So that includes like your faith institutions as well. Their position is that people should be paid for their labour. This is a key human rights principle that is enshrined in Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, yeah, potentially that non-financial sanction could be in violation with Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Well, the other one is also the community work one. If that community work exceeds, so I'll just work out what is, get the calculator.
While you're doing the calculator, I just wanted to point out that you were absolutely right about the reasons why people were sanctioned. And the key reason that I found looking at statistics earlier this morning was that most people on job seekers were sanctioned because they were unable to attend appointments. So that turned out to be 9,366 out of 13,000, or roughly 72%. So that is the majority of the reason why people are getting sanctioned. It's because they can't get to the damn WINS office, or they can't get to the place of the interview.
Also, the other thing is, if you issue a community work sanction more than 15 hours, 16 hours a week, you'll breach the Minimum Wage Act.
Good point.
doesn't take long to sit there and do that, to breach it. And if anyone is sanctioned, or put on there to do, say, 20 hours a week, you file a complaint with Ministry of Business and Innovation as MSD breaching the Minimum Wage Act.
Yeah, so
make sure that they sit there and learn it the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And Ricardo actually brings up that point. There's a minimum, so you've got to work at least 5 hours per week, but there's not a maximum.
Yeah, I mean,
so that could be abused. You could be exploited.
Yeah, exactly. It could be abused. Yeah. Let's continue off with a bit more from Ricardo.
Ricardo Menendez March.
Just following on the comments from the Minister, because if she said that Clause 5 was in relationship to the 26-week changes, why did she not just simply change the language in Section 21.3 of the Social Security Act 2018, the bit that said 52 weeks to 26 weeks, as opposed to just repealing it altogether? That to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So I will just seek clarification once more. Why is she repealing Section 21.3 of the Social Security Act and narrowing the definition of workup? But I will move now to Clause 8A so that I can broaden the scope of the debate a bit. So I wanted to ask another thing that she didn't communicate in her public comms and wasn't tested thoroughly because of that lack of proactive debate in the public by the Minister was Clause 8 and the changes to Section 181 of the Social Security Act in relationship to the application of health and safety legislation. I wanted to understand basically the consequences of applying health and safety legislation to in a broader sense, and I wanted to understand whether, from her perspective, whether Clause 8A was specifically needed as a result of the community work experience, and I know that in Clause 8A2 there is just a slight mention of it in terms of an activity in the community arranged by MSD, but more broadly, the broadening of how the health and safety legislation applies to some of this. I'm curious to also know what consultation she did around the enforcement of that. And so, because a lot of these volunteer organizations and work in the community, maybe in quite small organizations, that they themselves may not have access to, for example, an understanding of health and safety legislation. So I'm keen to understand how she sees the enforcement of any potential breaches of health and safety legislation as it applies in Clause 8A to, for example, activities in the communities. Because otherwise, this feels like it'll just sound nice, but there'll be very little ability to be able to enforce it. So what feedback, since this is being debated and introduced, has she received at all in terms of the ability for Clause 8A, and Part 1, to actually apply in a meaningful way? And so the other thing that I want to say is that part of the reason why I also wanted to talk about Clause 8A to B2 is that it's an activity that is voluntary. It could be a volunteer organization. So this is quite different from like being in a workplace where, for example, you may have people who may be more in tune with health and safety legislation. A lot of our volunteer organizations are struggling to even have enough, for example, governance training to understand their very basic responsibilities under the Incorporated Society Act or the laws that dictate our charities, but they would even have less ability to actually understand how health and safety legislation applies to them. So I think that's, with the broadening of the application of health and safety legislation, how does she expect that the volunteer organizations that I'm assuming will likely be part of the community work experience stuff that we'll debate later are equipped with the knowledge of how, when they're engaging with someone on the benefit, they'll understand also the responsibilities that they may have under the new, now broadened application of health and safety legislation under 8A.
Honourable Louise Upston.
Madam Chair, actually the member was on the select committee where this change was recommended by the Parliamentary Council Office. Very minor change that just ensures in terms of the report job search that this refers to, that the health and safety legislation applies.
Are these the amendments you added or wanted to add after the select committee submissions closed but before oral submissions started?
God knows what, but I actually had a look at that select committee report a few hours back, and here's what it said. It's that benefit recipients subject to the community work experience section would be required to find and participate in one or more positions within a community or volunteer sector organisation that the ministry is satisfied that it's reasonably suitable. So there are problems with this. Like, not every volunteer not-for-profit organisation is looking to take on more volunteers. They may not have any work. So you could go down to, I don't know, to, I'm just thinking of a non-profit organisation off my head, Salvation Army, yeah, or Hoo-Ha, or, or you could go to a place like, I don't know, I think Pukaha, the wildlife sanctuary down the road from me, is a not-for-profit motive. But sometimes, right, sometimes they're not looking for volunteers, or sometimes the skills that they're looking for, you don't have. And so they may be reluctant to take you on. And also, not-for-profit, again, potential for abuse right there, right? I mean, how many not-for-profit things does Destiny Church have? So, the minister is satisfied as reasonably suitable. Do they have a list? What do you think? What is reasonably suitable? The bill, just to carry on from the report, the bill would require the beneficiary or the job seeker, the person who has received the sanction, to find a suitable position within 2 weeks and to complete at least 5 hours a week in this position for at least 4 weeks. Okay. What happens if you're unable to go to that volunteer position? Let's say that your local charity, whatever, isn't looking for new volunteers. Okay. Yeah. Now you've got to go out of town. How are you going to get there if you're a beneficiary who might have a broken down car or doesn't have a car? I don't have a car at the moment. How would I get to a volunteer organisation in Masterton down the road from me?
I think Louise Upston might say, "Put your thumb out."
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there's any proposals here that WINS will help you get to. No, I didn't read anything like that in the bill that said that. Yeah, and WINS will support beneficiaries
on having the means of ability to get there. Like, put it this way, jury service does a better job at making sure that you're able to be funded to get to and from jury service.
Mm-hmm.
They do a better job of it than what MSD is. But I mean, knowing MSD, I'd love to know, when you get sanctioned, will they give you a list of local approved organisations in your area? I mean, put it this way, in the case of your one, I'm not sure if they will have the staff members going out to actually get the opportunity to do that.
I'll tell you what tends to happen when you go to WINS. They'll send you to a place like Workbridge, or they'll send you to a place like Citizens Advice Bureau, who, I've read the report or the submission from Citizens Advice Bureau. They're strongly against this bill. And that's because they have to deal a lot with low-income people who struggle to do things like get to place of work, right?
Deal with the aftermath of when their staff members at MSD misinform the clients. They go to Citizens Advice Bureau because it doesn't sound right, to then get told it isn't right.
You know it's bad when Citizens Advice Bureau does more to help low-income people than current WINS.
Yeah. They seem to be a bit more versed in the act. I do know that from the Facebook group Let's Talk Work and Income. We definitely deal with a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of people who get confused. And some of it is poor explanation. There's all sorts of things that work in there. Yeah. Let's get... Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I'll bring this point up when we look at the next section of this bill. But, yeah, I mean, I had a look at the stats about the traffic light system, and it's not comparing apples to apples. There's a lot of questions I have about the way how the stats have been presented, but I'll bring that up a little bit later.
Yep. The Honourable Willie Jackson.
I
think, Madam Chair, just supporting what our Green member was saying there, also, Madam Chair, and it's an incredibly frustrating experience for job seekers at the moment, forced to off the benefit and then forced to reapply, Madam Chair. But I want to come to Part 1, Clause 10, 183A, and just listening to what the Minister was saying, in particular in terms of job seeker profiles, Madam Chair. I just need to hear from the Minister, particularly with MSD. What assessment has the Minister considered in boosting capacity at MSD to process the job seeker profiles? And is there enough staff to process these profiles so not to delay their benefit payments? I'm particularly interested in this area, given that our staff is at MSD and are not trained social workers. They do not have this, with respect, do not have the skills to deal with some of the experiences that they're going through, some of the problems that are being raised out in the community. So we're worried particularly about the emphasis and the extra burden put on MSD, given the current climate also, Madam Chair, in terms of funding with the government, cutting back on funding. Also, and I'm also speaking, Madam Chair, to an amendment I put up in clause 10.183A, is there sufficient capacity to process profiles within 10 working days, and can they guarantee the protection of clients' personal data? This is some of the areas we want the Minister to look at, and put an amendment up to record that. But also to the Minister, how will job seekers be informed about their profiles and keeping their data safe? I think this is a huge concern amongst the community. What sort of security can people have at that level? How will the bill also assure accurate and fair assessment of job seeker profiles, and will there be provisions put in place, Madam Chair, to prevent AI-generated job seeker profiles from being used? This has been a push now that has been put forward, and if we're going to be relying on that, how secure, how comfortable are our people in the community, and what role does automated decision-making play, Madam Chair, to the Minister, in job seeker re-application processes? I ask you to consider that also, given there's a real emphasis in terms of automation, and a real worry at the moment, and I know obviously we're speaking to these questions, but a real worry at the moment in terms of how whānau are feeling at ground level with this more punitive approach from this government. How will they feel in these areas? So these are questions that I'd like the Minister to consider in terms of guaranteeing the protection of clients' personal data. How can she give us some assurances that will happen? Will she consider putting that forward as a further amendment in terms of some guarantee with regards to people in our community? Madam Chair, we do have communities who are very much on edge at the moment, and it would help if the Minister could give some assurances that their lives are not going to change dramatically. Given the past history in terms of national governments, given the Labor government's approach, particularly in terms of being more embracing, we'll get into some of the more community-type kōrero later on, but I would ask the Minister to consider some of these questions in terms of assurances for our people at ground level, and are they what level of comfort can they take now going to MSD, who are working with under a budget that is now, we would consider underfunded? They don't have the resources, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the skills at MSD to deal with some of these issues. And I haven't even got on to what the Māori situation, the disabled situation. There are a lot of concerned groups in the community at the moment. So I put those questions forward to the Minister to answer and to consider, and look forward to her response.
Honourable Minister.
Yes, I'd like to keep to the issues that are outlined in the bill, and the one that the member raises is the job seeker profile. This is more about the fact that we do want to have more meaningful employment conversations with those who apply for the job seeker benefit, and the frontline staff do an incredible work. I don't have the lack of confidence that member does in the ability of MSD staff, and actually having an applicant have a job seeker profile with their work experience, their qualifications, will actually make it so much easier for work and income to support them into employment. That's exactly what it's about. It's really simple. And we're just asking that job seeker profile is completed at the commencement of a benefit.
I wonder what is being taken into context of what about you've had experiences there, but you don't necessarily want to list them because you say you did volunteer work and MSD decided you should have been paid, then tries to abate your benefit because they decided you should have been paid, and then you having to take time off from your job search to fight MSD because MSD decided you should have been paid when you shouldn't have been paid, and you had to fight them for a $1,500 review of decision process, while submitting IRD information, bank statements, affidavit from the non-profit organisation you volunteered at to say it was unpaid.
That's a good point, especially with the fact that AI is being used more and more. You could end up with an issue like that, especially if you've got AI making decisions. But yeah, I mean, Willie Jackson is correct to bring up the point that AI in job applications, you've got vacancies that are being used as opportunities to train AI. And, you know, I think there is an AI company in Australia that's currently being taken to court because it turned out that the AI was doing job interviews and stuff, or setting up job interviews based on ethnicity. There was a racism bias. So, yeah, this coalition is really not prepared to deal with the way how AI is going to change the job market. It's not ethical that you have corporations and stuff like that using AI as a means to determine whether someone is suitable for a job. It's not. You need to do in-person interviews. Like, you've got companies like Woolworths and stuff using AI. It's like, oh, sign up here. It's like, are those people getting jobs, or are those people applying for the jobs just being used to train AI?
Yeah. And also, like, what happens when AI gets, say, the wrong decision? Do they import the data of, say, this is when AI got it wrong, this is how to reverse it, or do they just not put that into the system?
When I was watching this live, one thing that came up, and it probably will come up later, is that the proposing not having transparency about whether or not your case was assessed by an AI or by a human, and that fucking scares me.
Well, now, exactly, because then how are you going to sit there and question? Now I do know that we don't have a constitution here in New Zealand, but in the United States, it is called the Sixth Amendment, the right to challenge your accuser.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember the Sheldon Cooper episode on Big Bang Theory trying to get himself out of a traffic ticket and ended up getting held in contempt. It's how do you challenge your accuser, or how do you challenge the decision if the decision is made wrong, if you can't be able to tell if it's a real person or not? Or will it be when a real person makes a wrong decision, are they going to sit there and go, oh, but it was AI, and throw AI under the bus, which in turn doesn't sit there and fix any of the problems that go with it because it's evading accountability? So, what sort of problems will this end up bringing? Will we have case managers throwing AI under the bus when they get it wrong so they aren't held accountable to the same standards?
Potentially, yes.
Dicey system in there. And can MSD's own computer system handle AI, considering it can't handle it struggles to handle the payments when there's a public holiday? And I mean, that might be a better place to sit there and spend money on, is, updating the system from, say, Swift, which was something that was designed before we were born, and probably at a point when your parents got married. I'm not sure if your parents got married in the 80s or not. But, it's like, like at the point when my grandma was associate principal of Poro College is when Swift came out. They're still using Swift now. The reason why the inter-energy payment in the first year didn't kick in until July was because they had to have a long lead-in time to build the program section in Swift to pay out the winter energy payment, because the system wasn't designed to pay the winter energy payment.
900 jobs have been cut too from the Ministry of Social Development. So I don't know what those people in those jobs were doing. But if we're going to be looking at using things like AI, you need more people, not less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's get to Carmel Cepoloni asking more questions to the Minister.
Wanting to look at Clause 12, Section 233A, which is where there is the detail around cancellation of main benefit for continuing failure to comply. I wanted to ask the Minister if she was presented with any new evidence that showed that the measures in this particular subclause, that they would be effective in any way with regards to not only compliance but also supporting those who are on benefit to go into employment. Ultimately, Madam Chair, it's important to refer back to that because the objective of this bill is supposed to be to support New Zealanders into employment. The evidence that I previously seen certainly is clear about the fact that sanctions are not a tool that should be considered effective for the purpose of supporting people onto employment. So I'd like the Minister to let us know if she's been presented with any new credible evidence that would support the section to stand as it is. because of the concerns that I have with this section, with the way in which the sanctions will be applied, I also wanted to put to the Minister whether or not the operational instruction has changed. In the past, it was always the case that sanctions should be applied as a last resort, as opposed to something that is willy-nilly dealt out to clients on benefit, given the very serious implications for the individual receiving the benefit, particularly if that beneficiary has children or minors in their care. Madam Speaker, I am, because of the concern that I have with this section and the implications for people who would already be deemed vulnerable, I have suggested, or actually my colleague, the Honourable Willie Jackson, he hopes to be a minister again soon, where there is that we would, in clause 12, section 2338, after subclause 3, insert that MSD must not cancel a person's main benefit unless adequate support systems are in place to support client compliance, or without considering an evaluation on the impact of sanctions on the client and their family, or there is a risk of the client being homeless as a result of any cancellation, or if any assessment concludes that the sanction is overly punitive. Now, on top of wanting to know from the Minister if she received any new advice that states that sanctions will support New Zealanders or beneficiaries into work, I do want to know whether there was any advice about whether this particular section could lead to increasing homelessness of those that are on benefit. They are already receiving very low levels of income through the welfare system. Many of them are paying upwards of 50% for the accommodation that they're living in. If they are to lose half or part or full part, or full benefit, then common sense has to prevail, and their ability to retain and maintain accommodation would be compromised. I'm concerned about this because, of course, we've seen this with the barriers and the blockage to New Zealanders who require emergency housing being put in place, with the increase in homelessness being seen across the country. And our providers, our social service providers, are very clear that that homelessness increase has come about as a direct result in the policy change to accessing emergency housing. So I want to know whether this section is going to result in increased homelessness, and whether or not the Minister has received any advice from her officials to suggest that that may be the case. Going back to the first question, it was around whether or not operational practices changed. In the past, sanctions were applied as a last resort. The increased emphasis on sanctions makes me wonder whether or not that operational instruction or operational way of implementing the policy has changed. So if the Minister could respond to those questions, that would be great.
Honourable Minister.
Yes, the previous government had a directive that sanctions should be used sparingly. That's not the view of this government. The view of this government is that there is the balancing of rights and responsibilities between those who are receiving benefits and actually for taxpayers who are funding it. And so we do very clearly with the traffic light system is all about ensuring that, and actually 98% are at green, which is fantastic news. They know what their obligations are, they know what the steps are that will improve their chance of finding a job. I'll repeat, there is no sanction if you can't find a job. It's just taking the steps necessary to improve your chances. So the 13-week cancellation, I would reiterate, is for a person's, if they fail to recomply, and this would be a very rare occurrence where someone continues to ignore their responsibilities with all assistance that's available through MSD at the moment, and there's incredible support that's provided by frontline staff. At the end of the day, if people don't engage and don't comply with their obligations, there has to be a consequence, and our government believes in consequences.
Well, it's great when you say you believe in consequences, but what about, it's not consequence now, ask questions later. You've got to make sure that the consequence is justified. When you have an emphasis on sanctions, you're green-lighting, punish now, punish now, punish now. But unless you actually get the reasons why, a person going to go, I got punished, but I did the right thing. So I should be turning down jobs because I got punished for going to a job interview. Like, when you send mixed messages, people sit there and do that. You can keep saying, consequences galore. There's got to be consequences. Consequences should only exist when you do something wrong. if you keep rabbiting on about consequences, maybe I should sit down there and, I'm self-appointed Judge Sam Summers, and I sentence Christopher Luxon to life imprisonment without parole because I think he committed treason. Or something like that. Consequences. No, Judge. No, prosecutors. You don't need to sit there and show treason. I've decided that it is in there. If we can't keep having this emphasis on there must be consequences. Because when you emphasise, should we sit there and say every car that goes past the speed camera in Narrow Gorge tomorrow, issue them a ticket for doing 20 kilometres over the speed limit, regardless of the speed they go when they pass it? Maybe between 7 and 9 a.m. in the morning, every southbound car gets issued a ticket for doing 20 k's over the speed limit when they're stuck in second gear and not moving. Is that the type of consequences we need to give? Because that's when I hear consequences, I hear punishment, but not finding the cause to justify the punishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it leads into the next question. Is it ethical to sanction people who are failing to attend appointments due to something like lack of transport? Is it ethical to apply the community work experience sanction in those circumstances? Because the likelihood of them being able to commit to that, and keep in mind there is no maximum amount of time per week that person has to do volunteer work. There's minimum, which is 5 hours, so that could be exploited. But again, she goes, oh well, taxpayers pay for this. Well, hey Louise, I've got a question. What about the taxpayers who lost their jobs due to government decisions and who paid into having a safety net that is compassionate? Again, I go back to the Citizens Advice Bureau's submission, and I'm going to quote them. Well, I'm not going to quote them, but I'm going to give a summary of what they said. Concerns with the bill's proposed introduction of a money management system where 50% of the person's benefit is placed onto an MSD payment card. So they stated that many of their clients on low incomes and benefits pay more than 50% of their incomes on rent. Now, we see this in the data. I saw this in the Select Committee report, that those currently on job seekers benefits spend about 52% on their income of housing. And I quote the Citizens Advice Bureau, "This sanction risks people not being able to pay their rent and becoming homeless." I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
And how are they going to meet their obligations if they're homeless and got no transport? Exactly. You're not making it easier for people to.
I do like what meet their obligations on there. Yes, it is one of the highest ones for speeding, but I doubt when the traffic's at a standstill, it's issuing out tickets such as between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning. But that's what my point is. Why don't we use that as an example? Just dish it out. Actually, it'll be interesting to actually find out when the speed limit drops down to 60. I wonder if it's issuing out speeding tickets between 60 and 80 k's. That would be quite interesting, actually. But yes, no, Narrow Gorge is quite a high revenue gathering speed camera. That is so true. I mean, I go past it. Oh, and I can tell you right now, any of the speed cameras in Wellington, none of them I've received speeding tickets on. So I must be doing something right. Yeah. Let's hear more from Ricardo Mendez March.
At least on the Green Party's side. And this is a bit where it's adding new sections 1.3a and 1.83d and cross-heading instead and part 2 after subpart 2 heading. And then this is a job seeker profile bit. I wanted to jump onto 1.3a clause 2, starting, and I will also touch on clause 4, and then I'll move on to 1.83b. But in the Select Committee, a lot of the questions we ask about how this would work in practice, we heard from MSD that a lot of the stuff was still being developed around how this would be applied. So between then and now, I am curious to know, for example, in clause 2 of the new section in the Social Security Act that is being proposed, which is 183, the bit that reads, MSD must require a person to have a job seeker profile completed to MSD satisfaction. Since the Select Committee process, is the Minister aware of any guidelines that have been developed to ensure that people on the benefit, particularly those who are expected to complete a job seeker profile, have a clear understanding of what are MSD's expectations when it comes to the level of thoroughness that needs to be put into this profile, because I guess the legislation is quite, like, the language in the legislation is very broad. It just says MSD satisfaction, which means it's a high level of discretion attached. Often some of these more specific bits get added somewhere in the website. So I guess I'm curious to know whether these guidelines have already been developed or they're still underway, as we understood by the time we were hearing this bill in the Select Committee. Clause 4, for example, in this new section proposed in the Social Security Act, talks about how the form and revocation of requirement communicated to a beneficiary may be oral or written. I'm curious to know whether there's been guidelines already developed as to when will either of these be applied. So when will MSD choose to communicate things orally or in writing? And I'm also interested to know in so basically in clause 10, but basically clause 4 of the changes to the Social Security Act B, so that's on page 12, just for the chair in case she's trying to follow my references. It talks about how this form and revocation of requirement may be revoked orally or in writing, and only if MSD considers the requirement not reasonable in the circumstances of the person's spouse or partner or both. Has MSD already developed a list since the Select Committee process of this not reasonable circumstances? I also had a question specifically so now we're moving on to 183B, which talks about what happens if a person does not have a job seeker profile completed. Basically, I'm concerned about how this may result in delays to a benefit being granted. And this brings me to my amendment, and that is number 266, which would basically, on clause 10, add a new section in the Social Security Act, which is 183B and 183C, that will require MSD to assess a claim for a benefit despite the beneficiary failing to complete a job seeker profile if the person is in serious hardship, and not granting a benefit could present a serious risk to their well-being. The reason for that is that I think in the Act that is not clear enough. For example, when I was a welfare advocate, I would work with people who were homeless, who were not receiving a benefit, and sometimes we would take them onto work and income, for example, for them to receive a benefit for the first time. Delays on this would have massive consequences to the person. And so, and a lot of the people that were working who may have been chronically without a home may have literacy issues, for example, some which are not easily communicated. There's a lot of shame attached to those. So, like, not everybody may be so open to, I guess, sharing the barriers that they may experience in filling out some of these things. But, for example, if MSD assesses that somebody's already in serious hardship and delays on granting a benefit or the requirement to complete a job seeker profile may exacerbate that, I think the job seeker profile doesn't seem to be of much use, because at the end of the day, if what we are asking for is for people to be in a good position to enter employment eventually, I would say that actually going from zero to having a baseline income is actually a really good step to supporting people into employment. So I'm curious to know if the Minister would be open to making that provision clear. Madam Chair.
Thank
you. To making that provision clear so that if somebody is in hardship, the job seeker profile does not become like a genuinely unnecessary barrier to receiving income support. That also takes me to another amendment of mine that it touches on this very same clause, and so I wanted to bring it to this next 5 minutes, which is around the inclusion of people on sole parent support. Now, currently, people on sole parent support have, depending on the age of their youngest child, have different types of work obligations and requirements. But, for example, in the provisions that are being added in clause 10, so the new sections 183A, in clause 1B, sole parent support is explicitly mentioned. And so I just wanted to test whether job seeker profiles will be required for people on sole parent support who have children under 3. If that is the case, I would invite the Minister to perhaps change that and to not require people on sole parent support with very young children to fill this job seeker profile, because as has been debated through many other times, we recognize that actually those first 1,000 days of the child are really important. We want to support parents to be able to focus as much as they can on this, and recognizing that caregiving is work. So I'm curious to know as to whether the Minister would be seeing people under this new section 183A B2 to still be required to fill a job seeker profile if they have a child under the age of 3, and if she is open to my amendment. With the remaining 3 minutes that I have, I wanted to then move on to the new section 183B, clause 3, and the parts where it talks about the lapsing of benefit applications in relationship to a job seeker profile. And I wonder again whether, because we've got a provision here that means that somebody could apply for a benefit if MSD is not satisfied, that can end up lapsing. But I did wonder whether, since the Select Committee, whether she's talked to MSD around, for example, what is the timeframes that she expects MSD to be able to evaluate a job seeker profile, to then make sure that MSD can make a decent enough assessment that it has been completed to MSD's satisfaction. This is a point that the reason why I'm raising this, and this will likely come up in other clauses of this bill, is because we have recently heard from MSD about how the front line is, quote, oversubscribed. So the reason why I'm concerned about this is that, so we've got all these provisions, and particularly the new section 183A and B, that require MSD to be satisfied. I'm assuming that requires people at the front lines to be making decisions and assessments and to be reading those job seeker profiles, which in and of itself adds new tasks to the front line. But if we're hearing from MSD that the front line is, quote, oversubscribed, that has been reported in media by Radio New Zealand recently, I'm curious to know whether, since the select committee process, as I've said, she understands, for example, like the staff capacity, how much time on average she expects frontline case workers to take to assess this, whether any additional training has been already developed since the select committee process to ensure that those frontline case officers can assess those benefit applications in the job seeker profile in a timely manner as to not put people in situations of hardship. Because what I would hate to see is that somebody, for example, makes an application for a benefit, fills out a job seeker profile, and then there's a delay of days, weeks, or an indeterminate amount of time, and that delay isn't appropriately communicated to the person on the benefit. You know, the minister talks a lot about responsibilities, but I would hope that MSD also sees responsibility in assessing these job seeker profiles quickly. So again, I want reassurances from the minister, particularly if MSD has developed any more operational guidances or documents around how this is going to be put in practice about the timeframes that she expects these job seeker profiles to be evaluated and assessed so that people don't face unnecessary and cruel delays that could actually put them into homelessness, as my colleague to my right, Carmel Sepuloni, expressed in relationship to other provisions that exist in this bill.
Madam Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have answered both what the job seeker profile is and why, and I don't intend to repeat myself.
Well, actually, no. What happens when MSD does not deliver the same standard of speed and service they require of beneficiaries?
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that Louise Upston has overlooked is digital exclusivity. I was looking again at some supplemental stuff that the Citizens Advice Bureau put forward because they deal with a lot of these hard cases. Yeah. In 2020, they conducted a study of digital exclusion for their clients and found that in a 3-month period, Citizens Advice Bureau volunteers recorded 4,379 inquiries where this client was experiencing digital exclusion, equating to around 10% of all clients during this period. So, you know, we're talking about like 1 out of 10. Let's see if I got my stats right. Yeah. 1 out of 10 people that don't really have access or don't have the knowledge or the know-how or the means to be able to access my MSD, you know, and keep up to date with the information and be able to uphold their commitments and be able to avoid getting sanctioned. Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, Louise needs to do more than repeat. She needs to explain. Yeah. For some reason, I have a feeling that the explain part probably wouldn't happen. Where is the explain part? I mean, I'm just begging for her to talk about the traffic light system because I've got stats. Do you know when she starts talking about the traffic light system? No idea. I must have been at the gym when she was talking about it, but it's I do you remember what that was? It last week or the week before? It was. I don't know, but I know she brings it up at some point. Yeah, because I'd love to go over some of those stats at some point. So I wonder if we should flick over to the next one where there's a bit more. So this is a different day, but I think this is when there was more action that happened.
Members of the House is in committee on the Social Security Amendment Bill. Members, when we were last considering this bill, we were on the debate on Part 1. Part 1 is the debate on clauses 3 to 58, amendments to Social Security Act 2018 and Schedules 1 and 2. The question is, again, that Part 1 stand part. I call Ricardo Menendez-Martin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So yeah, we resume on Part 1, and I want to acknowledge that this is a complex bill with quite a few insertions into the Social Security Act. I wanted to pick up on the new Section 236A that is being added to the Social Security Act under this bill, under Clause 15, particularly around the sanctions for face failure, report job search failure without good and sufficient reason to meet requirements. I wanted to ask whether MSD had developed guidelines already to ensure people know how and to what kind of jobs to apply. Where has MSD gotten so far with developing these guidelines? So, for example, like if you have somebody who isn't, let's say somebody who never pursued a degree and then is applying for a lot of jobs, but clearly those the person's qualifications are not matched with the jobs, like would the person then be deemed to have met the requirements under the job search non-financial sanction? And if so, so I'm just keen to get the Minister's update on how does she think this could be actually operationalised in a way that meets the desired functions of the intent, or the desired intent from the Minister. Because in some ways, part of the reason why I think the Section 236A and the broader components of the report job search can end up becoming unworkable is that people can end up applying for jobs that clearly do not match the skills or even for example, could be applying for jobs that are really, really far away, but then they can't access things like the transition to work grant to allow them to then relocate, etc. The other question I wanted to ask in this call was in relationship to the new Section 236H in relationship to upskilling. I noticed that there doesn't seem to be a definition of upskilling, and so I wanted to ask whether she thinks that's a bit of a gap. I say this because the way that this sanction is laid out, and I note, by the way, Madam Chair, that this is one of the sanctions that didn't end up getting any public scrutiny via submissions because it was introduced later down the line, so the public did not get to submit on it. But I wanted to understand as well, how will MSD end up defining upskilling? Because if people are just required to attend specific workshops, for example, and comply and participate in those for a prescribed minimum of hours, how will then MSD ensure that those actually are upskilling people, right? It's different to just require people to attend seminars for the sake of attending seminars, but whether they're actually meeting the intent of upskilling. How has MSD developed guidelines to ensure that the prescribed workshops actually meet the intent of upskilling people? I once again wanted to check why is there no, in relationship to upskilling, but I guess this could apply to other sanctions, but specifically on here, why is there a prescribed minimum amount of hours laid on the legislation but no maximum amount of hours? Is the Minister concerned that this could be utilised in the wrong way by a minister and or future governments to then lay out a really unrealistic amount of maximum hours? I know that the status quo in so far as what we've seen in the public is that the intent is to have a minimum 5 hours in 1 week for 4 weeks. I want to take this opportunity as well to speak to an amendment that touches on clause 15 under my name, and this is amendment number 279 and 285. I haven't talked about those two amendments. This would delete the first one, 279 would delete 236A to remove money management, and 285 delete the new sections 236B, 236B, 236C, and 236D to remove community work experience. We believe that these two financial sections in particular are the most harmful. I wonder if the Minister would be open to removing the most harmful parts of legislation. Otherwise, I'm quite keen for the Minister to address the other questions I laid out. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I call the Honourable Louise Upston. Madam Chair, there was a lengthy discussion last time the committee sat around the job search, so I'm not going to repeat things that have been covered. In terms of the upskilling, the guidance will be developed in the next couple of months. The go-live's not till October. In terms of the hours limit, we do still expect that people will be looking for a job.
Doesn't really address a question about what's the maximum hours that would be put in there.
What is this? She's just like, I'm not going to repeat myself, and then sits back down again. It's like, what the fuck? I notice she does that when she can't answer a question.
Yeah,
so
that's one of Louise's go-tos.
Fuck. Okay. Yeah, so Ricardo is out here saying, this is a complex bill. But I thought Louise said it was a simple bill. But anyways, so yeah, she didn't answer the question. We're applying for a job that doesn't match skills, aka a job that requires a qualification. Would that count as meeting obligations? She just stands up and is like, I'm not going to repeat myself, and sits down again. Because quite often those are the jobs that pay enough for people to not be reliant on government assistance.
Yeah.
You know, and again, Ricardo brought up a good point. What about upskilling? You know, are you going to fund tertiary education? No, you're making cuts. So yeah, I mean, and why was this brought in later, after the submission process?
That was the part that was on there, was that it was atrocious the amount of amendments they went to the bill that were done after submissions closed, but before oral submissions took place.
I love this. A Jedi would be proud of that deflection.
Yeah. So let's see what Willie Jackson's got to say.
For the Honourable Willie Jackson.
Just further to that kōrero, I think one of the major worries we have is impact on whānau, Madam Chair. So that being the case, we're putting up amendments to help the Minister in that regard, and so just provided a couple of amendments there. But we have to remember that in that March 25 quarter, job seekers have increased 209,839 people in terms of receiving a job seekers benefit. This is an increase of 22,000 people, Madam Chair, so or 11.6% compared to the same time last year. So that being the case, we had a look at Clause 15, Section 236, and Clause 15, Section 236 after subparagraph P. We're wanting to insert that an assessment is completed within 10 working days on the impact of cancelling the main benefit on a person's family, because there's just from what we see, there's no obligation on MSD in terms of follow-up. So again, the concern, Madam Chair, is, well, what about the kids? The whole punitive approach puts aside the obligations to the wider whānau, to the kids. So would like the Minister to consider that be inserted, that an assessment is done within 10 working days on the impact of cancelling the main, what they will have in terms of the impact on the whānau. Also, I want to add another clause there. MSD consider the welfare of the client to ensure that the client has the support they need to pay for food and rent, and ask the Minister to answer what consideration is given to that wider whānau and the impact of cutting the main benefit, what it has on the kids and wider whānau, the children and partners, surely shouldn't have to go without if the parent is sanctioned. And I think that we have to put some thought into that strategy. What happens to the client after being sanctioned? Can the Minister, and this has been a constant question through this process, can she explain where are they meant to go? Also, the Minister, in relation to my inclusion of subparagraph D, ensuring there is not enough funds for food and rent, clarify how that will be delivered. We could consider the utility for food banks and budget advisors to support the client and whānau. So I'm just asking, in this amendment, as I said, the earlier one, an assessment done within 10 working days, impact of cancelling the main benefit will have on the family, and then that MSD must consider the welfare of the client and to ensure that the client has the support they need to pay for food and rent. Would the Minister consider that, Madam Chair?
Madam Chair. The Honourable Louise Huston. Madam Chair, I'm not going to cover ground again that we've already covered in terms of non-financial sanctions as they are, and the restrictions on sanctions on households with children.
I have a feeling we could actually have like a seat warmers compilation that sits down there and go duh, 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 duh.
Oh, you could just call it Louise doesn't answer anything. She just says that she doesn't want to repeat herself.
Yeah, I don't know, like, Taupua, this is your local MP.
This is your local MP.
This is your local MP.
Yeah, she doesn't answer anything. What are you paying her to do? Okay, so yeah, Willie Jackson, is he right about job seekers benefit, the number of people being on that benefit increasing? Yes, he is. And yeah, he brings up a really good point. Should children be punished if adults fail to meet obligations? Like, I couldn't get to I couldn't get to an appointment. I couldn't get to a job interview. My car broke down. Should children be removed by the state because, a parent couldn't get to an appointment? Like, what are we doing here? What are we actually doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, sorry, mum couldn't make it because the car broke down. Oh, shit. Kids, you're going hungry. Like, come on.
Well, yeah, I mean, that could also be a excuses. No, I can put you once. Did you ring the AA when your car broke down? Sorry, I didn't have the money for it. Well, you should know, as a responsible car owner, you should have an AA membership. Wins. Are you going to pay for it? No, it's not our responsibility to pay for AA membership, but since you haven't got a confirmation from the AA gentleman or lady who could sit down there and do that, we're going to constitute that your car was not broken down.
By the way,
you didn't ring the AA.
Yeah. By the way, what I brought up does happen in my neck of the woods because Ekatahuna, it's almost like half an hour away from Masterton, and sometimes people can't get to their appointments for whatever reason, right? Sometimes due to no fault of their own, the car just decided to die and there's no public transport. Are you going to punish those people, right, who would otherwise, with all intent, go to the appointment, or on that day they were sick, or for whatever reason they may have problem with they may have issues with digital exclusivity, so they may not understand how digital technologies work. Are you going to punish those people and their children? Because you have to look at it in that context. When you punish a parent, you also punish the children, right? Yeah. Are you going to punish an entire family and potentially make life harder for themselves and harder for them, and potentially make it that much more harder for them to get a job? And basically, you've got a whole bunch of dominoes now, bam, 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 falling down one after the other. It's just pulling people back, right, from being able to get a job and get off the benefit. This isn't helping people. This is punishing people for shits and giggles. I don't know.
I've just read what was it not Bernadette's just said, and it really does spring the points. And my advice is, if you're ringing MSD, just record the phone call.
Yeah,
Don't
just
bother
do it.
telling them. I mean, they're recording your phone calls anyway.
Yep. I personally believe that because they're a public service, you should have the right to record your interactions with them.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't care what they say. It's like, no, you can't record us. No, fuck you. Right?
Yeah.
People
You didn't have permission to record me. Oh, really? Right when you sat down there and broke the law?
Yeah, no. To that, I just say, no, go fuck yourself. I'm recording you because, people's tax money is going into this and they have a right to know whether or not the system's being abused.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, let's get on to it. And we're going to finish with Committee of the House and go to third reading. So we'll get to a more normalised format with the Honourable Louise Upston.
On Government Order today, number 2. Social Security Amendment Bill, third reading. The Honourable Louise Upston.
I present a legislative statement on the Social Security Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the parliamentary website.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Social Security Amendment Bill be now read a third time. Our government believes people are better off in work. We have already taken steps to strengthen the welfare system's focus on supporting people off benefit and into employment, and our approach is working. During the first month of the traffic light system, obligation failures decreased by 9%. Between January and March this year, over 23,000 people cancelled their benefit because they found work. This is an 11% increase on the same period from 2024. This bill seeks to amend the Social Security Act and the Social Security regulations to expand and enhance welfare settings to continue supporting people off welfare and into work. The welfare system will always be available to support people when they need it, but as this government has said from the start, people who can work need to meet their obligations to look for a job and be held accountable when they don't. I want to quickly outline the key policy proposals in the bill. And Mr Speaker, quite simply, this bill introduces non-financial sanctions to expand MSD's toolkit. Non-financial sanctions provide an alternative option to reducing someone's benefit, which is a financial sanction, when responding to a person's first work-related or social obligation failure. They will only be an option for a person in active case management and or a person with dependent children. Money management and community work experience are the first two non-financial sanctions implemented from the 26th of May. The bill also extends the period over which an obligation failure counts against people from 12 to 24 months, with the exception of youth clients, increasing the likelihood that those who are repeatedly refusing to comply with their obligations will have their benefit cancelled if they remain on the benefit for more than a year. The bill will require new applicants for certain benefits with work-related obligations to have a completed job seeker profile before their benefit is granted, and this change will encourage work-focused conversations from the earliest possible opportunity and help MSD to better match people to suitable job vacancies. The bill will also reduce the amount of time someone who is on job seeker support before they reapply for the benefit from 52 to 26 weeks. This means that clients will have more frequent engagements with MSD about employment. Mr Speaker, as this bill goes through its third reading, I would like to thank the Social Services and Community Select Committee for its considered recommendations to improve the bill, and in particular their recommendation to include two further non-financial sanctions, report job search and upskilling. These additional non-financial sanctions will be available by October. Mr Speaker, I want to put on record my thanks to the officials who worked hard on this very important piece of legislation and the MSD staff that get up each and every day to support New Zealanders into employment. I also want to thank the members of the public and organisations who provided both written and oral submissions on the bill. Once more, I want to remind members of this House and the public that the non-financial sanctions proposed in this bill will only affect those who are not complying with their obligations. Mr Speaker, most people on benefit are doing the right thing and these changes will have no effect on them. The bill represents another step forward in refocusing our welfare system, creating a more transparent, accountable and work-focused environment for job seekers. MSD frontline staff do an amazing job actively engaging with job seekers, informing them of their obligations and responsibilities and the consequences when they don't through the traffic light system. But they also provide incredible support to help New Zealanders find work. This matters because work is more than about money. It also gives people a sense of purpose, independence and connectedness, leading to a better future and helping families to break out of the cycle of intergenerational welfare dependence. Simply put, Mr Speaker, our government believes that people and families are better off in work. Our economy is better off when people are in work, and our government is committed to making this a reality. I commend this bill to the House.
The question
and I'd like to say, Louise, thank you for sitting there and personally thanking me in that speech for putting in a submission. I do know that you didn't take really any of the recommendations put forward, along with many of the people to the submissions, but thank you for thanking us for that. Let's give Louise a big round of applause in the comments box. Just type clap, 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 clap. Everyone, make sure you type clap, 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 clap.
Please clap. God, where to begin? That traffic light system. I finally get to talk about this. Okay. Right, so here's what she said. She's basically saying, well, the welfare traffic light system is off to a good start. Okay. So she states that about 95% had green lights for fulfilling these obligations, while about 2% or 5,920 people were idling at the orange and red lights for not taking the steps required to continue receiving payments, such as finding or preparing for work. The total number of obligation failures recorded in September was 6,975, and the total number of benefit sections applied was 4,662. This compares to 7,491 obligation failures and 5,268 sanctions recorded in August. Now, my question is, were the number of obligation failures the result of miscommunication and misunderstanding? Well, I decided to dive into those stats because as of March 2025, the percentage of beneficiaries, e.g., for example, job seekers and sole parents, that were meeting their obligations was 98.2%. The number of beneficiaries in orange increased to 0.7% from 0.6 in September 2024. So the amount of beneficiaries that are failing to meet their obligations has increased, although be it by 0.1%. Now, reasons for failing to meet obligations are not stated in the data. I looked, right? Why are these people failing to meet their obligations? I don't know. You just have to have a guess, and I reckon, which I hate doing. I like working with evidence, but I just have to make an educated guess. So excluded from this data is the number of benefit sanctions applied. So this is the data that she's going on and on about, going, whoa, look, most people are complying.
And how many of those sanctions that were applied were reversed?
Good question. I don't have the data.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as data is concerned, we only have the number of people that are in red. So benefit will reduce or stop, but has not reduced or stopped yet. The data doesn't show how many people went from red, reached out to wins, and were put back onto orange. We don't have that. So I decided to take the current data and compare it to last year's data. So at the end of September 2024, about 205,000 people were receiving job seeker support, and about 78,000 people were receiving sole parent support. In the September 2024 quarter, so keep in mind that when Louise is going on and on, yay, September data, she's just talking about the month of September. Now, the way how normally the data is presented is through quarters.
Batches.
Yeah, it's done in batches. Yeah. So the number of sanctions issued in the September 2024 quarter was 14,409, so about 5%. This is an increase of 8,232, or 133.3% from September 2023 quarter. So the amount of people that she's going, yay, look, most people are meeting their obligations, and the number of beneficiaries that are in orange, and red, and all the other traffic light flavors. Well, here's the thing. She's forgetting about how many people have been slapped onto sanctions. We saw a 133.3% increase compared to the September 2023 quarter. So we're comparing years to years. What the fuck? Like, why? I would like to know why they're getting sanctioned.
Why were sanctions lifted so much? Why was there a sudden increase in sanctions?
Yes,
were
why
they being issued willy-nilly?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I in that same data that I was looking at and I'm going to put that in the data. So, put the data in the data. Shit, what the fuck am I talking about? Put the data in the chat. Put the data in the chat. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. So you can compare 2024 to 2023. Now, in the benefit facts fact sheet snapshot, right? What I found is that the main reasons that people were getting sanctioned were because people were unable to attend appointments, including seminar appointments, and failing to prepare for work. So not only is there potentially miscommunication because you got a new system put in place, but you also got people, once again, they can't go to the meeting.
Yeah.
And they're getting punished because they don't have reliable transport options, or they don't have support to get to wins.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's pretty much my commentary on that, comparing the stats. But yeah, so when you see Louise getting really excited about traffic lights, right, keep in mind she's not talking about the number of people that have been sanctioned. Okay.
And she's not talking about the ones that are on Old State Highway 1 opposite the toilets that you used to have to pay either.
Oh, apparently my link is not working. I will try and make that work, but please continue, Sam.
Okay, so let's get on to the Honourable Willie Jackson.
Mr. Speaker, it's very sad to hear the type of cordial from the Minister, because the reality is that this bill makes life hard again for beneficiaries who feel they're very much under attack from this government, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about some of the most vulnerable members of our society, and we would like to think that government would be working a bit more closer with them. So we have opposed this bill all the way through, Mr. Speaker. We think it is grossly unfair and far too punitive. It's certainly the position that we as opposition have taken up, certainly the Labour Party position. I think it's, Mr. Speaker, grossly unfair to Māori, who make up, we're talking 15% of the population, yet they Māori account for 36%, Mr. Speaker, 36% of all main beneficiary recipients. The Misley Bill doubles the period, and that's the problem here. And we were certainly tested when we were in government over this, Mr. Speaker. But this bill doubles the period during which obligation failures are counted against someone, adds non-financial sanctions for first failures, and forces beneficiaries to reapply for their benefits every 26 weeks. That is very, very tough, Mr. Speaker, on whānau who are already struggling at ground level, already struggling in the community, and you're talking about a devastating effect, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, on families who don't deserve to be going down that track. So it's not a bill about supporting people. This is a bill, Mr. Speaker, about punishing people, which sadly is how this government has been perceived out there in the communities. It's another attempt by the government to blame beneficiaries instead of taking responsibility for their policy that has spiked unemployment numbers. Mr. Speaker, why punish the unemployed for an unemployment problem surely that this government has created? And while they'll say that there is no major increase in terms of unemployment figures, the unemployment figures are still at an unacceptable level. Māori unemployment is up to 10.5%, Mr. Speaker, with an increase in terms of 7,000 more people going on to benefits. We're particularly disappointed, Mr. Speaker, because when we were in government and when I was an employment minister, Māori Affairs, Māori Development Minister, there was a focus, Mr. Speaker, in terms of targeted programs in terms of women, targeted programs in terms of Māori, targeted programs in terms of Pacifica. These now are programs that this government is withdrawing from. They're not seeing the benefits of a targeted and focused program. Benefit and job seeker numbers have risen significantly under this government as a result of worsening economic conditions. I think we understand that, but this government needs to take some responsibility for the consequences of their actions, Mr. Speaker, instead of blaming the unemployed for being unemployed. Mr. Speaker, the government has all but given up trying to get beneficiaries into work, and now is trying to essentially force people away by making accessing the benefits they're entitled to increasingly difficult. And this is something that we traversed, Mr. Speaker, through the committee stage. The difficulties that some people have in managing this and working with AI and working with computers. You're talking about sometimes people with multiple problems, difficulties, just trying to survive, and then all of a sudden they have to reapply, Mr. Speaker, for a benefit. Doubling the amount of time a failed obligation counts for does nothing but further punish job seekers. It certainly doesn't help them find employment, and it is a disproportionate punishment, Mr. Speaker, especially if they're caregivers. And again, the government is not showing enough empathy, sympathy and aroha in that direction. Similarly, making job seekers reapply every 26 weeks is only designed to make being on job seeking an increasingly frustrating experience. It's just to force people off regardless whether they're going into employment. Enforcing money management, Mr. Speaker, as a non-financial sanction could lead to a variety of issues, especially if beneficiaries spend more than half of their entitlements on rents and bills such as water and power. Mr. Speaker, this malicious and spiteful legislation is nothing more than whipping the poor and then charging them for the beating. The government is essentially admitting it would rather punch down on our most vulnerable rather than do anything to help them materially improve their lives. Mr. Speaker, not only are these suggested changes cruel and counterproductive, they're also unfeasible. MSD has admitted, again, we traversed this through the committee stage, and we also had feedback from MSD, but they admitted during scrutiny week that they're already under huge pressure. As their frontline operational capacity has remained broadly unchanged. But, Mr. Speaker, they have had 700 cuts in terms of their backroom staff. So how do you ask an agency already under huge pressure to roll out the government strategy and program? It is next to impossible. So you have people, don't get me wrong, there's all good people at MSD. So they worked with us and they work with the government, but they are not social workers, Mr. Speaker. They are not social workers, but they're also not robots and they're not machines. And they can't roll out a government strategy when they're undermanned and having to do multiple things. So 700 cuts to the backroom staff would make it near impossible to roll out a program, a tight program that the government wants. The rise in main benefit recipients now mean they must serve an additional 30,000 more people. And we've already seen a decline in accurate assessment with a quarter of beneficiaries, Mr. Speaker, not receiving their full entitlements. Now that the government has heaped more pressure on MSD's operational capacity, essentially doubling the amount of job seeker applications MSD must process in any given year, notwithstanding the forecast rise in job seeker numbers, Mr. Speaker. This is on top of other requests that the government has heaped on them, such as implementing the traffic light system, a very controversial system, Mr. Speaker, increasing the amount of job seekers eligible for case management, increasing the amount of sanctions imposed on beneficiaries, increasing the amount of meetings that job seekers must attend. It's not always possible, Mr. Speaker, to attend all these meetings. As I said, some of these people are struggling as it is, miss a meeting, miss their allowance, miss their putia, the money owing to them. The whānau suffers. Government has to look at this. The government has to be more understanding that sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it's about giving these people a second. It's not about a second warning and it's out. Sometimes about a third, fourth, or fifth warning, Mr. Speaker. I know that's hard for some on the other side to understand, but when you give up on them, you have to understand the consequences in terms of that family and in terms of that community. And I know that people on the other side do work at the coalface with some of these people, but understand some of the difficulties that they have to go through. Mr. Speaker, the regulatory impact statement alone shows the government should not have proceeded with these changes. Very clear as a bell. The RACFIS for this bill highlights one of the consequences, and this is what I'm saying, maybe that MSD will have to direct more resources towards compliance and therefore away from employment initiatives. They will literally have to put less resources into helping beneficiaries to work, Mr. Speaker. And surely the principle of this is to get them into work, but it's going to have the opposite and adverse effect. Research cited in the RAS highlights that sanctions may increase mental and physical health problems, including substance abuse and poverty. The RAS highlights that previous work on reapplication showed that cancellations of the benefit as part of the reapplication process often lead to a new application, suggesting procedural denials rather than ineligibility. The RAS also highlighted that focusing on those close to return to work via case management was almost certainly to the detriment of long-term beneficiaries. In summary, Mr. Speaker, this welfare policy will hurt people, not help them. I denounce this policy. We in Labour absolutely denounce this policy. It is the wrong policy, Mr. Speaker. It is too punitive. It's about punishing people all the time. We need to take another way. We need to have a look at things a different way, a more embracing way, a more aroha way. That is the view of Labour, and we will stick by that and put that again in place when we're back in government. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.
Well, it was on the money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with him. I mean, the stats pretty much line up with what he's saying. Jobs have been cut. People going on benefits has increased. The amount of sanctions have increased because people are struggling to comply. And there are ethical concerns around those sanctions, whether or not it is ethical to sanction someone because they were unable to attend an appointment. Does this government care about that? Is this government giving case managers discrepancy around that issue? These are questions I'd like for Louise to answer. But
managers still required, and this was implemented under Carmel Sepuloni, to have a two-person verification. You have to get a second opinion before you can apply for a sanction, because that was common that people were being sanctioned, and a lot of these sanctions were being overturned, funny enough. And it was simply, as soon as you had to get a second person's opinion involved, sanctions dropped by 30%, which indicates were sanctions being issued inappropriately or disproportionately. Because I am very certain, and it's a shame MSD don't sit there and keep stats on it, but I'm certain if you could sit down there and number it, you will find the same names in every single branch issuing probably the majority of sanctions of that office.
Well, I mean, speaking of stats, I mean, we've got stats on the amount of people that are on sanctions. I mean, such as the increases that we have seen, an increase of 133.3%.
Yeah,
of sanctions being applied.
Say it is certain case managers who are constantly sanctioning people. I remember working in Cumberland, there were certain case managers who were always known for issuing out sanctions, whereas others were a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, I would love for research to be done into this. If anyone has access to that research, I'd love to look at it. That's probably something I have to dive into. But yes, who is giving the sanctions? Is it the same people? How frequently are they giving the sanctions? Are they being applied ethically? I would love to see this.
Place to do it. Will it stay on? In theory, an overturned sanction shouldn't stay on your record because it was wrongly issued. But who knows? Who knows? And that's the problem when you sit and do it. I mean, put it this way. The best way to describe it, if you've never been on the benefit, which probably for our audience, they probably understand a bit more about that. At the moment, for a driver's license, you get demerit points for 10 years. No, not for 10 years, for 2 years. Okay,
I mean,
let's pretend your demerit points are for 10 years for the sakes of one thing here. Imagine your demerit points now apply for 20 years, but you have to renew your driver's license every 5 years. Oh, and in the case of people like me who have truck driver's license, we have to do medicals every 5 years. But our demerit points stay on there four times as long as the reapplication period.
But Not So Bernadette brings up a very good point. If a ruling is overturned, does it stay on their record? I don't know. That's a question I'd like.
But you never know.
Yeah.
Because
Louise would probably.
It is what are the notes that are written in there are what case manager. And the problem is you can't access the notes they put on your file on my MSD. So you can't even see what's been written in there. They could sit there and go, instead of saying sanction overturned, they could say beneficiary magically complied.
Yeah.
Would imply the sanction stays on there. But that doesn't necessarily, you don't see that record.
Yeah, exactly. And what we're seeing with these proposals from Louise Upston is a lack of transparency, not an increase in transparency.
Yeah.
And for example, look, she's proposing to extend the period over which obligation failures are counted against a person from 12 to 24 months. So, again, that's marks against you. But again, Not So Bernadette just said, what happens if it's overturned? Is that put in your notes? I don't know.
Yeah. It is such a Mickey Mouse system. And maybe they need to spend the same amount of money that the IRD spent on upgrading their system for MSD to do it. Yes, it might cost billions, but for long term, it might bring in a better system. Okay, let's get to Ricardo Mendez March.
Grow poverty, grow inequality, grow the number of people living in their cars, and this formula includes cut benefit increases, keep benefit levels below the poverty line, then increase unemployment, followed by increasing benefit sanctions, and just watch as more people experience material hardship, food insecurity, and as UNICEF reports that Aotearoa continues to be one of the worst countries for children's well-being in the developed world. The minister should be ashamed to even refer to this bill as supporting people into employment because there's nothing in this bill that does this. Absolutely nothing. She either did not read the bill or is just choosing to omit the bits of this bill, the majority of this bill, that will simply push people further into poverty. The so-called non-financial sanctions, and that is, I think, an inaccurate description of what they do, will push people further into poverty. I think calling them non-financial sanctions is simply incorrect, because let's outline the benefit sanctions that are in this bill and what they do. Compulsory money management, which will put 50% of someone's income in a payment card that then they won't be able to use to pay their rent, to pay their bills, or for other basic essentials. When we know that most people on the benefit are already paying 50% of their income on rent, we know that this benefit sanction, deemed non-financial, will literally leave people unable to keep a roof over their head. There's a financial impact in here. Then let's look at community work experience. Most organizations who were consulted reported that they were not so keen to participate in this because it actually destroys the purpose of volunteering and it burdens those volunteer organizations. That benefit sanction will do nothing to adequately support people to engage and to be part of their communities. And what's worse, people subjected to the sanction as well as others will be unable to access things like hardship grants. For those who don't know, people on the benefit, many of them rely on hardship grants on a sometimes regular basis, sometimes even weekly basis, just to survive. How can we call these sanctions non-financial when they strip away people's ability to access the very assistance that allows them to sometimes have food on the table? Then we also have two benefit sanctions that were added later in the piece. Terrible lawmaking process, because the minister outlined in the cabinet paper that she intended to do this and didn't let anyone in the public know until later in the select committee stage, stripping away people's ability to submit on these two other so-called non-financial sanctions. If the minister was so confident about the process that she was following and her policies, she would have let people know of her intentions so that these sanctions could be adequately scrutinized. Let's talk about the so-called job search report, which will then force people to look for apply for 3 jobs each week, but then those people won't even be able to access the assistance that then allows them to enter into employment. So for example, financial assistance that allows them to have access to uniforms, that have access to transport, that have access to, for example, a vehicle that allows them to get into that very same job. Literally what the government is doing is making it harder to get into employment. And no matter how much evidence we present to the minister over how benefit sanctions do not work, they simply push people further into poverty. The minister seems to not care. But I actually think that it's beyond the minister not caring. The minister always intended to increase poverty in this country. Because I cannot see anything in this legislation that does otherwise. And we've already seen the impacts of government policies, for example, the stripping away of subsidies that allows people to access basic essentials, such as prescriptions, such as public transport, and that number growing, the number of children who don't have their bare essentials, like food, at the table to just be well. Mr. Speaker, It's really clear to me that there's nothing in this bill that will support children to thrive and parents to find employment. And it's also clear to all of us, it doesn't take anyone doing an economics paper to know this, that there are not enough jobs out there for every unemployed person on the benefit. Those are facts. This means that the government not just relied on increasing unemployment, they haven't created enough jobs to actually ensure that everyone who's unemployed has an opportunity to get into work. They gutted benefit increases only to then increase financial sanctions. But I want to also believe that a different future is absolutely within our grasp. Because under the last national government, I was privileged enough to actually take part in a campaign to get rid of the benefit sanction affecting solo parents. At the time, around 2017, there were 17,000 solo mums who were affected by the sanction for simply not naming the other parent of their child, being stripped away of income support. The National Party then did not care. They did not care about the fact that solo parents were being pushed deeper into poverty as a result of this benefit sanction that had no evidence of working. They constantly opposed repealing it, but we changed the government and we got rid of the sanction. And if it was up to the Greens, we would not only get rid of the sanctions imposed on this piece of legislation, but all benefit sanctions, because it's actually the government's responsibility to show us and demonstrate that the policies are working as intended. So far, they haven't. They've gone off vibes, they've gone off cruelty, lack of empathy, but we should not expect anything else from a Prime Minister that called people on the benefit during the campaign trail bottom trawlers. Because this is the kind of attitude that the government members take when it comes to the people living in poverty, using names, conjuring beneficiaries who they've never met, to simply try to make ideological points and punch on those that are literally sometimes sleeping in the cars, often many of them receiving income support, working to make ends meet. And what's worse is that in this piece of legislation, the government also narrowed the definition of what we call work gap, which is the definition that allows people to then apply for a benefit. By narrowing who is considered to have a work gap, effectively what the government is doing is limiting who can access income support. And this is to get them on track for their target of 50,000 less people on the benefit. That is not about getting those 50,000 people into work. It's simply to strip 50,000 people of income support. The government has admitted that they don't care where those people go when they are not on the benefit. They simply want to get 50,000 people of income support. For what? To pay for tax cuts for landlords. That's basically their motive. They're taking away resources from the poorest people in our country to give money to the landlords. And it shows that this government is reheating their nachos by bringing back policies from the 80s that having massively increased unemployment and inequality simply to give bucks to the wealthy few. Mr. Speaker, I want us to commit to ensuring, and I commit everyone on the side of the House, at least from the Green Party, to fighting back against this piece of legislation. We commit to listening to the voices of people on the benefit and bring them with us in our campaigns to change this government and have an income support that allows people to live with dignity. In fact, I would say that caregivers form a large part of who's on income support. It's a work that is actually the most underappreciated by this government, because if this government appreciated caregiving, raising children, they would not have income support for those that are raising children and are focusing on raising children as a primary task below the poverty line. This government has decided to treat caregiving obligations as not worthy of livable incomes. I want to make it to everyone out there doing their best to access income support under a government that is making it harder for them to do so, at a time where even work and income staffers are telling us that the front line is, quote, oversubscribed because of the policies that this government has introduced. When we have even the case managers telling us that they don't have the capacity to help people and continue with programs to prevent homelessness because of shameless and terrible, cruel policies that simply increase poverty, we know that something is terribly, terribly wrong. No matter how much the government members on the other side may try to spin this as a positive thing to help people get into unemployment, the facts speak for themselves. This bill will increase inequality, poverty, homelessness, and will not support people into employment. No matter what the government member says, it doesn't actually match the facts that are in all the reports, all the evidence, all the research, because they don't care. All they've cared about, as they've indicated to us, is calling beneficiaries bottom trawlers, punching down on those who need help the most, and increasing unemployment, because this isn't a government that is here to serve the many, simply to serve the wealthy few mates. We will fight for an economy that works for everyone and to repeal this terrible and shameful piece of legislation as soon as we get back into power. Let's make this a one-term government.
Like that little jab there at the end. But yes, he's right. I mean, basically what this government has done is like, they've looked at the economy, they rightfully made the judgment that the economy is getting too hot. We need to, create a bit of an artificial recession. Okay. What was not necessary for them to do was to strip away the safety net that would have caught those people and carried them through until our economy stabilized. Okay. That was a choice by this government to do that, because they wanted to give their mates tax cuts, and they wanted to give the corporation mates tax cuts. They wanted to give themselves tax cuts, and they wanted to buy a bunch of secondhand helicopters and do bills that everyone hates. So, it was a choice by them. They didn't have to strip away the safety net, just like they didn't have to, they didn't have to screw over victims of state abuse by not committing to creating a new redress scheme. This is all a choice.
Yeah. I love what Not Bernadette has. Citizen Gold. not to accept it as a source of payment. Well, many landlords, private landlords, not property management companies, some do not want to be on the WINS payment redirection system because they find the process too burdensome, or there could be various random little reasons.
Just to comment on that point, yeah, that whole card system is going to screw over private landlords as well, because a good portion of the income that people are receiving, like 50% of that is on a fucking card, right? 52% of your money already goes towards rent. Okay, so that could potentially put people into arrears.
Yeah. And also makes things a bit messy when it comes to unpaid rents with arrears if you do part payments.
Yep.
Because WINS's systems itself don't cope with that.
No.
Yeah, they don't cope, let alone many of the systems that actually property management companies use do not cope well with part payments because the system itself is designed on familiarity reconciliation.
Yeah, so what Louise is doing here is she's effectively screwing over a portion of landlords that rely on beneficiaries for rent. And if those beneficiaries can't meet their obligations because, I don't know, they've got a broken down car or they don't have access to public transport, the landlord's going to be fucking screwed as well.
Where they do everything right and the case manager mistakes, what do you call it, Jonathan for Johnny, and sanctions Johnny instead of Jonathan when Johnny is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that with someone who has a common name as Sam, or, that sometimes ends up creating problems that, with common names. And say you've got seminars with multiple people with the same first name that go there, and say not all the Sams turn up. Well, you do run the chance of the wrong Sam being sanctioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to Punjit Palmer and see how it goes.
It's appropriate for a member in a debate to raise points that are of a debating nature. It's not appropriate to use language that is attributed as a quote when it is out of context. So an interesting contribution to the House, but contestable one. Punjit Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm taking this call on behalf of the ACT Party to support the Social Security Amendment Bill. Great to see that this bill has come for the third reading, and after the third reading, hopefully it will be going through the House today, that these changes that this bill intends to bring will be implemented. Mr. Speaker, on this side, we really want to encourage people getting into employment, but listening to that contribution from the Green member, it seemed like people, those who go out to work, are doing something wrong, and people, those who are sitting on benefit, are actually doing something right, and they should be supported to stay on benefit. On this side, Mr. Speaker, we want to see that people, those who are on benefit, I know that there are some circumstances because of which people end up on job seeker benefit. They need to be supported so that they can get back into employment. And there are some people, those who are always actively looking for employment, but there can be a small fraction of people, those who are on job seeker benefit, those who get demotivated after some time and then become too relaxed staying on benefit. And we want to make sure that they understand that if they continue to stay on benefit, it's not going to help them, it's not going to help their family, it's not going to help anybody. And it's better that they continue to look for an employment. And for that, we are putting several mechanisms in place in our welfare system. The existing traffic light system, I don't understand why the Labour member said that the traffic light system is controversial. It's actually quite a transparent system, makes it very, very clear where people sit when it comes to their compliance. And the other thing that the Green member, I think, has missed seeing is this, that it's only, these sanctions are only for people, those who are not complying. If people are complying, there are no sanctions. So if they don't comply, their first obligation, if they miss that, then there is this money management sanction, which the ACT Party campaigned on. And we're really happy to see that this is being implemented through this legislation. 50% of their funds will be put on a card. They will be able to use this money for essential goods. So it's a non-financial sanction. So money is still there, but it's the form that they get money in is going to be different. Community work. How could a member criticize the requirement of community work? This is just 5 hours per week for 4 weeks. Community work will give these members the opportunity, those who are on job seeker benefit, these people the opportunity to go out and interact with different organizations, meet with different people, and maybe that is how they will find their new opportunity, their new job. Upskilling. Why would people not want to upskill when they are on benefit? Of course, people would like to see that they are being upskilled, they get the opportunity, and reporting on job search. They are on job seeker benefit, then reporting on job search. I don't think there should be any hesitation. But somehow, the speeches that I've heard from a Green member, from the Labour member, they are kind of stigmatizing job search. On this side, Mr. Speaker, we want to see that people are actually going out and actively looking for opportunities because we want to see that everybody is able to flourish. So all these changes that this bill brings are actually good changes. We want to see that
These changes are actually helping people, motivating people. These changes are to remind people that their circumstances can change. And that's why government is putting these kind of changes in place so that we can support people to get back into employment, to do well for themselves, do well for the community as well. So, Madam Speaker, I would end by saying that the Labour member and the Green member, the contributions that I heard from them were the contributions basically indicating that it's totally fine to be dependent. On this side, we want to encourage empowerment, but on that side, they want to encourage dependency. And it's very clear from their contributions, and it's very clear from our contributions what we are advocating for. We really want to see people to be successful in their lives. And that's why, Madam Speaker, we support this bill. Thank you.
Yeah, so this speech is one of the reasons why I'm actually considering applying to go do my degree in applied economics at Massey, because she's a smart lady. She has a PhD. She is capable of academic honesty. Unfortunately, she's a very dishonest individual. You should look at the way how she represented the way how Waikato University applies extensions for law students, right? She is deliberately dishonest. And people like her are the type of people I despise the most because they're intelligent, they are privileged, they have a PhD, right? They got to go to a great university, and what do they do with it? They shit on people who are vulnerable. They don't lift people up with that knowledge. I recently went to a Massey University graduation with all the science students, a couple of PhDs in there. And all the professors were like, you must use the information we have given you, the knowledge we've given you responsibly to lift each other up, to lift society up, to benefit society. What is Parmjit Palmer doing? She's bashing beneficiaries. And I would be embarrassed if I was her professor right now. Frank, because that is disgusting what she just did. She ignores the fact that the majority of job seekers spend their benefit on rent. 52% is the average. You don't need a PhD to look that shit up.
It seems to be a very vibes-based approach. Like, I gave this title to Brooke Van Vel, the minister with all the theory and none of the practical. Well, Parmjit Palmer, I think you deserve title of the undersecretary to the minister of all the theory and none of the practical. Because it's just you're like, here's the thing is, you're criticising Ricardo for mentioning the reality. In theory, no one should be wrongly sanctioned. But guess what? It happens, and it happens a lot. In theory, things shouldn't go wrong. In practice, it goes wrong a lot.
She's a PhD. She should know the difference between theory and application. Shit doesn't always work when you apply it.
It's like the person who sits there and says, just don't make the bus late.
Just comply.
Just don't make the bus late. Put it this way, Parmjit Palmer, what happens if a person is wrongly sanctioned? Just don't just turn up to your appointments. What happens if one's failed to tell you to not turn up to work? Just don't turn up to the appointments. Parmjit Palmer has your brain disconnected very much. Just don't turn up to the appointments.
Look, listen, I know getting a PhD is very taxing, but it shouldn't be that taxing on your brain to the point that it turns into melted plastic. Like, what the actual fuck did I just listen to?
It is really sad. You're so right. It's really see such great intelligence wasted.
It's just so I'm just boggling. I'm just like, what the fuck? I would get if I presented that in my accounting course, right, and gave the exact same reasons that she did. I would get a fucking F, and then I'd be kicked in the ass and told, maybe accounting is not for you, or studying economics is not for you. That's how bad this is. She just ignored everything. Like, all the stats are available. You don't have to search very hard.
Well, some good news is we got Tanya Yankovic, who is a qualified accountant.
Oh, wonderful. Let's go.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak in support of the Social Security Amendment Bill. And I'll stick to the facts, Madam Speaker. I heard a lot in the previous contributions about this not being a caring government. The facts are we are a caring government. Anybody who goes into public service has a heart for caring. And sometimes caring has a different look. Our way of caring is encouraging people to get out there and make their lives better. And sometimes that is giving someone a hand up rather than a handout. That's what caring looks like. New Zealand First, excuse me, is very much about taking responsibility for our lives. It means helping people who need help, but also helping those who want to get out and make a better life for themselves. And we see that the introduction of some of these processes and controls not only make the system more efficient and more effective, excuse me, Madam Speaker, but it also gives people a reason and an opportunity to step up in their lives. So that, Madam Speaker, is why New Zealand First will support the bill. And just also I'd like to make a mention to all of the people who work at the to MSD. They, whilst they're not social workers, I hear and have had feedback that many people have had extraordinary service from them. And I just want to acknowledge them, because every single person that they help, they never quite know maybe where they've gone in their lives, but every now and then you get a phone call from someone and say, do you remember you helped me once upon a time? So I just want to acknowledge all of the MSD people out there who are working hard in service to the people of New Zealand. I commend the bill to the House. Thank you, Madam.
I mean, I would love it with the words of hand up. But some people don't even want to give the hand out or the handout. They want to sit there and cut the person's legs off and keep them stranded. Or they want to put, concrete bricks down. They want to rip off the bootstraps that they were told to pull yourself up by. And when they start pulling themselves up by, they want to rip them off and keep dragging them down and down and down again. When you have people who deliberately do that, saying, we believe in giving people a hand up, why don't you sit down there if you look about giving a hand up? Why don't you sit there and change the way the deduction system works for people working? Because at the moment, it's not working. Temporary additional support payments, that if you sit there and earn $1, you could lose up to 132 cents for every dollar you earn. Why not sit down and do it? Now, this might be nasty to people in the Greens, but the principal foundations of the British system called universal credit partially solved some of these issues. Why not sit down there and have deduction systems in place that actually incentivize that you are better off for doing the right thing? Not have a system in place where it is confusing and sends the wrong message because it doesn't deliver the results it should deliver.
I don't know why the coalition's obsessed with making work a punishment when working should be a reward. Like, we should be motivating people to go work, right? It's like, hey, you get more money when you work. Cool, I'm off to work. It's like not, hey, you didn't meet your obligation, now we're going to whack you with hours of volunteer work and you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir, to quote Willy Wonka. So Tanya's out here saying, stick to the facts. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. What are the facts? Are they caring? Well, they don't appear to be. They've made all these cuts to the public sector. And she's like, well, people that work in the public sector are very caring. Cool. So what are you saying, Coalition? Are you saying you want people to care less? It's like, what is your definition of a hand up? A 133.3% increase in sanctions? So we're lifting people up by squashing them.
Yeah, that's literally trying to chop off their legs and then tell them to walk and denying them the wheelchair.
Come on.
Being forced to have your legs amputated, get told to walk, and be told you're not allowed to have a wheelchair.
I mean, she's an accountant. Come on. Like, it would make her like, hey, all right, let's do a thought experiment. Yeah. If I get sanctioned because I can't get to wins, does that mean I have the ability to also get to the volunteer place of work? Right? Make that
Not if they put the volunteer place to sit there and work in Upper Hutt.
Yeah, none of it's like over the hill and far away.
Or in Palmerston North.
Yeah, again, over the hill and far away.
Here's a better one. On Stewart Island.
Oh, over the sea and far away. Yeah, it's like, it's just if people can't get to the WINS office, how the fuck are they going to get to the volunteer place of work?
Yeah.
Make that compute. I don't know. Shit.
Okay, Takatai Tashkip.
Oh, e te pika. Ai ko Takatai Tashkip. Tēnā koe e te pika, tēnā tātou e te whare. I stand on behalf of Te Pāti Māori this afternoon to express our unequivocal opposition to this bill, the Social Security Amendment Bill. When I think about this bill, I think about a whakatauki that we serve by at our marae. A mohi ake te oro o te iwi ka puta ki te whai au. The health and well-being of our people is paramount, and we must do whatever it takes to ensure our people are well. 70% of Māori are under the age of 40.
1 in 3 Māori are under the age of 25. 30% of our people are on the benefit, and 35% of our people are the working poor. And the employment rate is skyrocketing to a 10%. It's unacceptable. This legislation is under the guise of promoting employment and reducing welfare dependency, which threatens to exacerbate poverty and undermine human rights and disproportionately harm Māori communities. We've been hearing from both sides of the House this afternoon about what's not working, what should be working, how it should happen. I want to share my experiences out in the community, frontlining with people. Yes, here we go again. You know why? Because I tell you a real story from people that I sit with and have sat with, to hear their stories of struggle, because Pohara Street is alive and kicking. Whānau talk about how hard it is. Whānau are struggling out there on the daily. They can't make ends meet. And these sanctions, they're like taking away their livelihood, because the benefit for some families is the only option. Don't get me wrong, there are whānau out there that don't want to be on the benefit and they want to live a better life. But there are just some things that stop them from doing so. Can I talk about the families that come off the street every day at the marae? They actually ask for jobs, they want a job, they want help with a job, but they can't get one. Do you know why? Because they have backgrounds and pasts that the system doesn't allow them to move past their past. We've had whānau that come off the streets that have come out of jail, they want jobs, they can't get one. Or there's an employer that wants to give them the opportunity to have to get that start, but when the police vetting comes back, they haven't met the criteria, so they can't get the job. So they're back and they're needing to be on a benefit. Do you know how that feels for those whānau? They feel shamed. They feel whakamā. And so, therefore, the cycle continues. There were programs out there that were able to help these families actually get better employment options. They could put them through training, but those funding opportunities for providers have disappeared. Funding has disappeared, and our people are no longer able to seek opportunities to further benefit themselves. I tell you, being whakamā is one of the most horrible feelings to have as a whānau member, and Māori providers are always out there trying to ensure we do give our people a hand up. They don't actually want a hand out, they want a hand up. I also want to say we need solutions, and there are solutions. Whānau, what is a solution? The kaiarahi workforce is a solution. Bringing MSD workers out from behind their desks and into the communities, working alongside providers and partners is a solution. But the bigger solution is our whānau need to know how big their voices are, how important they are. 100,000 people marched. There were 307,000 submissions. We heard those voices, and we want to continue to listen to the voices of our people. The biggest voice, though, I can say for whānau is we need to ensure that this government is a one-term government. Kia ora.
All right. Okay, so where do we go with that? Okay, so to kind of finish up the segment, the majority of people that are complying, okay, and we're talking, there are a lot of people that, like 98% of people that are on the benefit are complying with their obligations, are the same people that take complying seriously, and many of them want to work. Some of them can't work, but they are doing the best they can. They don't want to be a drain on the system. For whatever reason, they've ended up there. And kicking them, it's not going to help them to improve the economy. It's not going to help them to contribute to society. It's going to make them want to shell up, right? And to not want to seek out help. This bill is horrible. It's just going to result in more homelessness. And for what? For what? It's not going to help the economy. Just as I said before, this bill was not necessary, right? The safety net didn't have to be shredded. And are there improvements that can be made? Of course. And, I can go over the list of recommendations made by the Citizens Advice Bureau, who often work with low-income people. I'll just list them off now because I agree with them. Increase core benefit levels to the standard of livable incomes. Okay? Yeah, I agree. Raise the minimum wage to the living wage. Yep. Increase the disability allowance. Yep. Overhaul relationship rules. Yeah, those are dumb.
Yeah, I know. Two Tinder dates.
Yeah. Remove sanctions.
Actually, no, they don't have a guideline as such. So one case manager being 2 Tinder dates, and the family court rule of living in being together for 3 years.
Oh, I mean those relationship rules that are currently in place, right? They don't increase transparency or honesty between a case manager and a beneficiary, right?
No.
Forcing people to be on the same benefit could keep people stuck in really bad relationships. Okay,
Yeah.
so and then to carry on with the list, remove sanctions. Agree. Work should be encouraged. It shouldn't be used as a punishment. Why the fuck would you use work as a punishment? I don't know. Because it develops discipline? No, it doesn't. Motivating people to go to work because they get a bigger reward, that motivates discipline. That's called positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
And then their final recommendation is to wipe debt owed to the Ministry of Social Development. 100% agree.
Especially
100%.
considering how easy it is to get into some of the debts, yes.
Absolutely. So the recommendations that they made is a hand up. It's not a handout, right?
Yeah.
Again, like I said, most people that are complying are the same people that want to get into work. Some of them can't for whatever reason, but they're doing the best they can. Let's help those people.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to that fun section of the bills that submissions will be closing in the foreseeable future. The Medicines Amendment Bill closes on Monday, the 19th of May, which is tomorrow. The Employment Relations Termination by Agreement Amendment Bill closes on Thursday, the 22nd. Make sure that it is a no to sexual predators, Tim Jargo, from doing that. And I seriously mention that because it's an act bill. You should put it on there. The jury's Age of Excusal Amendment Bill closes on Thursday, the 22nd of May. The sale supply of alcohol, Anzac Morning. Kira McAnulty's alcohol bill also closes on the same day, along with the Anzac Day Amendment Bill.
Ladies and gentlemen, like and subscribe, and you'll get to see more of this cat, and you'll get to see more of this hat.
Yeah. And just like to sit there and say, we have some good news. We have sale on Print Mighties on our website. I hope it, it might just be one at the moment. No, there's been two. 2 shirts have been sold. So 2 of our famous It's in the Ballot theme shirts, proudly designed here by Laura, have sat down and been sold.
I made that! Look at it! It's beautiful.
So yes, going to be on that one. And the hoodies.
Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? It looks really warm and snuggly. I mean, I would wear it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yes, if you want to sit there and do that. But, yeah, with, yes, that one is showing up on there, yeah. 2 shirts have been sold. The interesting thing I found out about this, about Print Mighty, is it doesn't actually tell us who's brought them. So if you want to anonymously buy stuff from us without us knowing, it's actually quite simple. So if you're David Seymour and you want to support the project, but you don't want to say you're a proud supporter of woke, this is a great way to show your support.
Yeah, if you buy one of these T-shirts, you're part of the woke club.
Yeah. And for Citizen Gold, can we get these upcoming submissions that are added to the show notes in future? You might need to be a little bit more specific on it. Is it future submission dates? Kiwi Skirt has put it out there. Normally, Stacey punches that sort of stuff of those links in, but Stacey isn't with us tonight, so Stacey hasn't been able to sit there and do that.
Well, I might have to make a Where's Stacey T-shirt if she keeps disappearing. Kind of like Where's Wally. Just put Stacey in the middle of a bunch of ballot boxes.
It's all right. She probably got a bit of a shock when she received an email me on Friday to say what my latest will is. Yeah, that might have helped with that, because on Friday I signed my new will.
Oh, I see. Yeah, she's in the will. Okay.
Well,
I hope you don't plan on dying anytime soon.
It was 10 years old. Things have to be updated. Yeah, and yes, she got sent it because, so at least if anything happens, she can go, here's what it says, you can do this.
But yes, buy our merch. Do it.
Yes, please, yes. And sit there and get it. Now, just for those who are wondering, we're having a budget special this Thursday with myself, Laura, some popcorn.
Yes, this is going to be the special guest, ladies and gentlemen.
Some popcorn.
I don't know. This is
we
going to provide this commentary.
Yep, and some other great news. Frankie's going to be joining us, but we still haven't decided whether we're letting a Merlot or Shiraz.
I'm a vodka person. Oh, I might bring some. I might bring some rum. I might spice it up.
The thing is, I need to do shopping after the. I mean, I've got a very busy Thursday coming up there. I've got a coffee gig on Pink River Day at a Furrow Bay school. So if you want to go and get coffee from me, head to a Furrow Bay school. I'll be there in the morning. If you want to see me in front of the Justice Committee with new Justice Chair Andrew Bailey, I will be putting in my submission on. It's in the ballot submission on the 4-year parliamentary term, and the dog's breakfast it is. And then I've got to somehow make my way back home, ready for 1:30 for the show. So if you want to sit there and join us, please mark us in your calendar. I think I'll just be. I think just a moment. I can get this here. This is the joys of what happens when you can do things on a bit of a fly when you get there. So if you're
there's gonna be a lot of people probably live streaming that budget.
yeah. But yes, if you want to watch the It's in the Ballot one, please do so. So as you can see there, you can click on this lovely key called Notify Me, and that will notify you when to start. Now we kick off at 1:30 to have budget commentary and fun parts that go with it before we hit the show. We might have another panelist before the day does come ahead, though. So,
but you have to, guys. If you want to click on the bell, you first must subscribe.
Yes, and
you got to subscribe.
We're only 39 subscribers away from being able to get the partnership,
and we get money. That's a cool thing. We can pay for shit.
Advertising revenue, and you know, instead of me paying the restream bill.
Yeah, we get to do
and
more
of this. Do super chats.
And I get to make more merch.
Yeah.
Actually, I would do that regardless. But, hey, now I have a profit.
I'm just wondering what
money incentive
next shoot could be. Where's Stacey dressed up as Where's Wally?
I don't know how popular that would be, but, I'm sure Stacey would buy one. And probably Kiwi Skirt.
Yeah, well, the aim is to sit there and do it. And also, if you're in Wellington, Laura has managed to secure a car for the day.
I have?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we are doing the pilot show for It's in the Ballot.
Oh.
Yes, Kiwi Skirt, because we did one last year. And also, is BHN doing? Is it not? We don't know. But we did a budget special last year. We're going to do one again this year.
Hey, guess what? If you have ADHD, use that. You can watch 2 streams at the same time. Did you know that? That's a superpower that people with ADHD have.
We have backgrounds of a different stream going on.
I mean, I do that. Sometimes Aotearoa Liberation League streams at the same time as BHN. I just have both up. I'm just like, I'll just switch back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we had election night party. This is back quite a few years ago. And we had 2 TVs going, and we had one on Channel 1 and one on Channel 3. I think Channel 1 was on mute, though. Well, it was on mute until something juicy happened, whereas Channel 3, we had the volume going because John Campbell sounded a bit better than Mike Hosking.
Yeah, it's like just open all the windows, guys. There's nothing stopping you unless you've got a crappy computer like me from loading multiple windows and multiple streams at once. Like it's a free country for now. You can do that.
Yeah. We haven't had Trump try to invade yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going live with Craig after the budget. Oh, okay, all right, that's cool. That's it. That's even better because hey, more the merrier. I want people to stream the budget. Do that.
Exactly. And I mean, here's the thing: is we'll cover all the speeches.
Yep.
Yeah, and we'll find out who's going to be doing the speech to Party Māori. Well, we have Te Kuta Whereas, considering unless something drastically goes wrong on Monday, we won't have Hana, Debbie, or Rawadi.
Either way, guys, we're going to be here. We're going to watch it.
Yeah.
You can join us if you want. Hate if
you're
going to go.
I think what I was meant to be saying is we're doing a pilot for It's in the Ballot before Kiwi Skirt basically threw me off the scent. At the Newtown School Hall on King's birthday to do a production pilot of our 2025 format.
That's a lot of driving. I think it takes me about 3 hours to get to Wellington, and then 3 hours. Oh, 2.5 hours. And then
it only took me 2.5 hours to get to Steve's place in Pongaroa.
Yeah, about 2. I mean, it depends on how many roadworks there are because, national.
Well, I do believe that they have put the speed limit back up to 100 kilometres an hour between, was it Carterton and Featherston?
Well,
So you'll be able to get there 90 seconds quicker.
90 seconds quicker.
Get you probably about 90 seconds quicker.
Now, please tell me that the place that we're doing the pilot at has good parking, because I don't want to do parallel parking on a steep hill.
Do you know where Wellington Hospital is?
Fuck!
And we're at Newtown School, in the school hall, that will have the gate open that you can drive in.
Okay, all right. It's the school flat, because I hate parallel parking on hills.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, because I know Wellington Hospital's got a big hill near it, and I'm just like,
Yeah, no, we're not going to. No, I know which road you're talking about, called Hospital Road.
Yeah.
Or Hospital Drive, or whatever it's called. Hospital something. And
Hospital something that's going to send me to the hospital if I try driving up it.
No. It's on the southern end. It's in the heart of Newtown.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And here's just something else. We do have another trailer. Let's just give it a bit of a rewatch because I've been told it's quite good. This one's only 15 seconds. But for videos that are edited for this show, this is going to be the new ending onto it. What do you think?
You got to subscribe. If you want to see more of that beautiful ad, you got to subscribe.
Okay, so we're 11 minutes over time, so let's get moving. We will see everyone here on Budget Day at 1:30 in one of your windows and tabs.
Yep.
And we'll see you then. Have a good evening.
Like and subscribe, or the cat gets it.
Thank you for watching the Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/It's in the Ballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by It's in the Ballot Productions, live at 8 p.m. New Zealand Standard Time.